Book 6. Planet. "Talk," screamed Queen Calixta into the face of Horace. "Tell me about your intergalactic army. I can't find a page on the Universal about it, but this whole peace deal is just a ruse, isn't it? You're planning to invade all the different planets and rule it yourselves, aren't you? There's no other reason to be here on this backward rock. Well, I want in." The Agrosian world had become gradually more and more unhinged as the time turned into days, and still none of the IPO had told her anything much. Well, no one except the Belobrat, and he was now such a gibbering wreck she didn't quite believe any of the things he'd been admitting. It seemed preposterous and, well, alien, this grand scheme of 9 planets, plus an outsider, all working together to protect each other and live in peace. It just had to be a lie. That's not how planets worked. The bigger ones conquered the smaller ones, and that was an end to it. Horace, of course, could tell her nothing about this plot she had dreamed up for them, so said nothing, his laid-back manner quickly getting on Queen Calixta's nerves. None of her ancestors' captives had ever behaved in quite this way before. Fighting, yes. Pleas for their life, well, definitely. Running away, you bet. But no one had ever placidly blinked at her and shrugged their shoulders under interrogation before. The royal ruler decided to try a different tactic.
All right then, if you won't talk about that, then tell me about the most precious minerals on these other worlds. The Universal wouldn't tell me much of those either.
Again, the Habridat shrugged nonchalantly. There's only a Habridat can.
"There's nothing much I can tell you that isn't on the Universal, I'm afraid. Only Eleron took any real interest in that sort of thing. He does everything. The rest of us don't have to."
Hoping against hope that his president wasn't suddenly about to turn up and prove him wrong. Queen Calixta was confused. She had only ever seen people shouting at this creature, and now they were praising him for his knowledge. What sort of a universe was this? Nothing made sense. The Agrosian way was far more straightforward. Everyone knew what they needed to know, and otherwise learning was forbidden.
Let's see how you stand up to torture.
Queen Calixta had never had this problem in the training her mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother had given her concerning the conquering of planets. In their experience, any newly discovered world over in their part of the galaxy simply caved in under the weight of the Agrosian superior firepower, their tiny populations, and their desire for a quiet life, and were all too eager to agree to their captors' terms. By integrating the best warriors and weapons from every world they conquered, the Agrosians had soon developed far beyond the abilities of their neighbours, to the point where even thinking of defying them was obvious suicide. These aliens on this side of the galaxy were different though, and they didn't seem to recognise that they were up against a superior race. To look at them, they seemed like the weediest bunch of aliens Queen Calixta had ever seen. Even the biggest, the Dewsbury giants, seemed to give way under a very minor amount of pressure. But somehow, whether through ignorance or a sense of solidarity, the Agrosian still wasn't getting what she wanted. All Queen Calixta saw was the Habridat staring back at her.
"Have you finished, Mom?"
He inquired.
"If that's quite all, I would appreciate going back to the side of the room for slight rest and recuperation, and then I will be eager to go back to discussing matters with you."
That, at least, was what was going on in the outside. In truth, Horace was screaming inside his head, desperate to get the Agrosians to stop. But several thoughts had occurred to him. One was that he genuinely didn't know enough to be useful, and could only really tell his angry invaders about his own planet in any detail. Like most of his class, he'd skipped the intergalactic affairs syllabus and slept through the exam, figuring that there would always be aliens to ask about that sort of thing. Another was that he didn't want history to remember him as the sitting de facto president who betrayed the universe. The third was that Horace was surprised at how courageous he suddenly felt, now that life had thrust him into a role of responsibility, after successfully ducking it across the whole of his life. Fourth and most important was self-preservation. Horace didn't want to die, and keeping the Agrosians thinking he had information they needed, but that he was too brave to pass it on, combined with Eleron still being at large, gave him just enough faith in the old Habridat adage that things were going to work themselves out in time if you didn't worry about them too much. Queen Calixta hadn't been expecting this, and wasn't quite sure how to react, but decided to bluster on.
All right then, that will be all the torture for now, but I will be back to talk later, alien, and next time it won't be so pleasant.
Horace walked nonchalantly off to the side of the room where the IPO were being held prisoner, with the Glabdahardit now seemingly permanently under the table. "How was it, Horace?" asked Lawrence.
"Did you tell them anything?"
asked Odebega. Asked
Just give them what they want and make them go away, please, said
Bob, a shell of his former self.
The situation is hopeless, just hopeless. Our future as a species lies in the wings of a minuscule Humrasianart madman that we don't even trust. Just give in now and save yourself pain. They're going to take us over anyway eventually.
Horace smiled back at them all and whispered in a low voice.
Right, now that useless president is the only hope we've got, and I think Eleron's got more gumption than any of us realised before we met him. Don't worry, gang, we're going to get through this. Just stay calm and keep doing what you're doing. All the time I've been studying us, I've been doing my best to study them. From what I've gathered so far, they only have one ruler per generation who oversees everything. And we can take her out somehow, and the rest of the aliens won't prove much of a threat, and from what I understand, she won't be expecting anyone to dare. Also, they seem to be a bit rusty, and haven't actually conquered any worlds in a long time. They don't seem to have any idea about the concepts of democracy and socialism. They just expect us to rally around our leader, and that's it. No one else is worthy enough to fight them. That gives us a huge advantage if we can work together to defy them as a unit. Well, as long as we don't get Eleron, we're safe for the next few days, and I'm not going to tell them anything when it's my turn. Keep calm, we can all get through this, together.
Horace put out one frazzled wing, which was joined by all the others. The hooves of the Clandesprod, the claw of the Camalosian, the paw of the Glabdahardid, the hand of the Dewsbury giant, the flipper bumps that the Mgrumps had instead of arms, the wings of the Mrasianbrat, and the technical gadget that Mechion used instead of limbs. Only the hands of the Belobrat were missing, as Bob was shaking too hard to join in.
Universal entry, pause, AB 544-936-49288. Browse Universal Systems, keep going. Acting, President Eleron. Headline, mission to Glabdahardid. Retrieved from the Universal Records Office.
An hour into our flight, and I was starting to overthink and have doubts again. Geraldine, I asked tentatively, as much to fill the silence as anything else. Am I what you expected? From my speeches, I mean. She turned round in her seat to look at me. No, not in the slightest, she said simply. She laughed. They say never meet your heroes, dictators or sentient argybrass for that reason, don't they? They'll never measure up to what you see in your mind's eye. I wasn't in the mood for laughing, though. In what way? I asked anxiously. She paused for a second, as if weighing up what to say next. You're not as confident as you sounded in your speeches. You're always so sure of your vision whenever you spoke, and your part in the universe. But even if you're not as confident as you seemed, you're just as inspiring as I thought you would be. Oh, I said, I am confident about peace, in the future, and how best to get it. But in the present, when I'm in charge of it, I'm a lot less sure somehow. I wish someone else was doing this job, not me, and I could support them instead. I don't think I have what it takes to be brave. I wish I was an extrovert, like the Belobrat and the Clandesprod. I'm not brave either, said Geraldine, but sometimes you have no choice of what life sends your way. And you're here, aren't you? You could have run away and not gone to Earth at all. That's bravery enough. After all, being brave without feeling scared is just another way of being foolhardy. And there are enough creatures like that out there. I smiled appreciatively. I mean it, Eleron, Geraldine continued. If I was with a Mechion, the logical thing would have been to surrender. If I was with a Belobrat or another human even, they would probably be trying to sell off all the other planets to keep their freedom. If I was with a Glabdahardid, they would be hiding under a table right now. If I was with a Habradat, they'd be asleep. With Dewsbury Giant, we'd just be comfort eating. Well, I said, you should have seen how much I ate at breakfast. And I can't exactly look to the Grumps or Camalosians for comfort. A Humrasianart, dreaming of peace and inspiring others, but not at the cost of those he loves. That sounds like a good compromise to me. I felt strangely better then. Only to lose my confidence as Glabdahardis came into view. A small orange planet with large white oceans of acid pools. I knew that of all the 10 planets, this was the one that might well take the most persuading. After all, never in their entire history had Glabdahardids volunteered for anything, and they had learned through several millennia of instinct to run away at the first sign of danger. Somehow, though, if I could only persuade them to follow us, then the other species would surely follow easily. And I knew deep down they weren't cowards. They were just naturally permanently on high alert and scared easily, which wasn't strictly the same thing. Finding out where to land on this planet was quite a challenge, as Glabdahardits tend to be more than a little nervous of off-worlders, and didn't exactly encourage them to visit. Thankfully, though, we found a nice empty patch of Glabdahardits to land on, one of the few parts that wasn't farmland for the huge crops of vegetables. The one major city was easy to spot. It was protected by a huge dome and surrounded by what looked like a giant pillow fort. As we passed, we spotted a giant peace fountain, made out of what looked like twigs and fur, shaped into likenesses that I recognised as Emwyn and Lizzie, the original explorers of the universe, and two others that were, with a bit of squinting and imagination, clearly meant to be my parents, though clearly made by a species that hadn't spent much time around either human or Mrasianart physiognomy. No sooner had we arrived than 10 Glabdahardits hurried out to us, carrying something. The closer they got, the more I could see that it was a portable table, reinforced with heavy furry metal Glabdahardinum. I thought at first that it was a means for them to climb up to meet us in the shuttle, or perhaps for use in another dreaded banquet. But no, they were simply carrying it above their heads, for protection. "What are they doing?" whispered Geraldine. "Hang on," I said, consulting the Universal. "Apparently it's a custom left over from their dark times when the Belobrats used to rain missiles on top of them all. They don't like being outside if they can help it. This just reminds me again how brave the Glabdahardits on Mars and Decreeta really are for going all that way. They're not a race that travels well." "Would a table really save you? From a missile?" "If I know Belobrats, then I suspect their missiles were less about destruction and more about showing off. They were probably full of fireworks that went bang a lot, but secretly did nothing. The table probably saved their ancestors from being singed." From under the table, a quaking figure in a suit of armour approached us. In their paw was a 9-foot stick with a glove attached to the end, which Geraldine and I shook up and down.
Greetings, President Eleron. I'm your pet monkey. Sorry, human. We're not used to other worlds still on Glabdahardis, and we're still working out the correct terminology. I'm Jennifer, the Glabdahardis Secretary in State.
"Secretary in a state, more like it," Geraldine whispered to me. "Can you see her shaking?"
And I welcome you to our planet in the name of peace, following your international broadcast from enthusiasts. We don't tend to get that many visitors to our world. As you can see, your arrival has caused quite a stir.
Jennifer waved her arm at the window of the nearest large building, a squircle that was neither square nor circle, but somewhere in between. Where around 100 Glabdahardits were pressed against the window, their big eyes wide in surprise at seeing us. "I am grateful for your reception, Jennifer, and for your agreeing to meet us. We bring these with us as part of our mission from the Dewsburys." I handed over their gift, which was much appreciated given the look on the delegation's faces, as they stuck their nose into the giant Dewsius bag. "Did they explain to you why we're here?"
Yes,
said Jennifer, smiling.
and why you can't talk about it now. You are very brave, President Eleron, but we are very scared as a species. We will do our utmost to help you on your way and play our part in securing peace.
"Thank you," I said, touched by their courage and hugely relieved that their response wasn't simply to kick us off their planet. "The Glabdahardit needs?" I asked, hoping that I hadn't given too much away.
Already being worked on now, and should be finished by the time you have rested.
Jennifer waved her paw at a figure in the crowd who shyly shuffled to the front. I recognised him as Coulter Wonkite, the TV interviewer I'd spoken to earlier.
"My dear Eleron,"
He said,
how nice to see you again. I trust your lady wife is the same.
"My apologies. She wasn't herself when we last talked," I muttered, turning red, but he just carried on.
Not at all. It was a rating swap, and no harm done. We heard your speech from Deuces, and we've been replaying it on a loop on our channel and via the BCBC, of course. But we were all terrified when we first heard it. On the repeat, we began to see how badly the universe needs us all to come together, and on the third, we were determined to pull our weight alongside you. I see it as my duty to make sure every being around the universe hears about these awful events as soon as possible, and as many people as possible will be behind you when the time comes. Not that we have much impact here, but perhaps we can provide some very small tokens of assistance to you.
"Thank you," I say gratefully, knowing full well that Coulter was being modest, but in truth his programme was one of the most watched on all 10 of our known planets.
You must both be hungry and tired.
Continued Jennifer.
Come.
We squashed inside the main building with the braver and more curious Glabdahardits as our host gathered round a large object that looked a little like a 10-foot tall coffee filter.
Welcome you, your drink.
explained Jennifer.
It will put fur on your chest, Papa, and it goes very well with, those.
And she reached out for the gift for Dewsbury's handed to us, which Geraldine passed over. As for Glabderhardits, all queued round and lapped from the same trough, I spent my time gazing at the walls, although there were a great deal of paintings pinned up on strange bits of parchment. "Geraldine," I suddenly exclaimed, "this is Jane, my chief diplomat. And over there is Jeremy, my old babysitter back on Mars. How wonderful to be amongst friends again."
"Yes,"
said Jennifer.
"baby, we are so proud of them both. Jeremy was always such an adventurous so-and-so. We always knew he was built for brainer and better things than his team has, which is what you're in now. He barely opened his eyes before he was scuttling across the floor trying to get out into the sunshine as a baby. Don't do that, we'd say. Curiosity killed the Glabderhardit, but he wouldn't listen. Before we could stop him, he'd be out there again. As for Jane, well, she was much the same. She was always volunteering for any job, however difficult. We were so pleased and proud when she was elected into the IPO.
I saw her lip tremble.
Will she be alright, do you think? She means a great deal to me."
I went to put my arm around her, but Geraldine got there first. "We have every hope. I was there when these aliens came to Earth, and it sounded as if they were only interested in Eleron here. If we can just fix it so that they can't find him." "They'll either kill all of us, or none of us," I said sadly, "depending how it goes, and if they find me."
"Then please,"
said Jennifer.
"forever and ever, keep running and running and running so fast that they'd never ever find you. I know it will be hard for you, but it will keep us all safe. That's the Glabderhardit way."
I shook my head sadly. "I'm sorry, but no. In a few days these aliens will just be able to hand our universe over to a different president, and then it won't matter if I've run away or not. We only have a limited time to get ready, I'm afraid, and then I have to be brave and hope this plan works." Jennifer placed a tail on me, which I knew to be a great honour amongst Glabderhardits.
"And I wish you every success, Intergalactic President Eleron. May you spend less than half of your life afraid, as we say here, and make the most of your time not spent under your table. What's more, I would like to come with you, to play my part, when it's time."
"Oh no," I said. "I couldn't possibly risk any other lives." Secretly, I had already planned to send Geraldine home and do this by myself. Jennifer, though, was having none of it.
"We know what it's like to be conquered by an alien race,"
she said.
"In the past, it wasn't so bad once you got used to it. You just had to pretend to listen to the Belobrat's incessant talk and nod a lot. But this time, it feels a lot more threatening and oppressive. I was elected to keep my people safe, which is the most important job a Glabderhardit can do. I can't very well do that in full conscience if I am not there to help, and you really shouldn't bear the weight of this event alone. As you say, either we all live or we all die. I want to be there with you, making sure that we live."
Despite her bravery, I could see Jennifer's shaggy paws shake with nerves, and I knew how much courage it had taken for her to say this. "Then we would be more than glad to have you," I said, feeling both more presidential and more scared now that more lives are being lined up alongside mine. "Whatever happens, you are a credit to your world." Just then we were interrupted by several alarms that went off all the way through the dome, causing a huge squeaking of excitement and a flurry of little furry legs disappearing under a giant table that came down from the middle of the ceiling.
"Glabderhardit's red alert! Glabderhardit's full alert! Our sensors have picked up a vibration on the planet's surface!"
Geraldine and I looked at each other.
"Quick, under the guest room, next to me!"
said Jennifer. We followed her. The amount of knocking knees from the Glabderhardits meant that there was a constant drum against the table legs and floor. Had the aliens caught up with us here? Was my plan over before we could put it into action? Had we put our friends in danger? Was it all over for us? After a few seconds of quaking, a new alert came over the intercom.
"False alarm! False alarm! Sorry about that. The reported vibration without appears to be a rather loud sneeze that took us by surprise."
There were groans all around us as we got up from under the table. It sounded like it wasn't the first time this had happened. That day,
"You can never be too careful,"
said Jennifer, looking embarrassed.
"Now there are no more interruptions. We'd better press on."
The time came to deliver my speech all over again to the waiting Glabderhardits, along with details of when and where we thought we might need their help. I explained our plan, took questions from the Glabderhardits, and apologised for the fact that my voice seemed to make them all jump. Not a good sign in an audience usually, but I was assured this was quite normal by my kind host. I embellished my speech as best I could given where I was, appealing to my audience for their help by reminding them what life used to be like in the old days when the Belobrats invaded them, and how they needed and deserved a coalition of planets to stick up for them the way we were trying to do right now. Mostly though, it was amazing how much of the speech was the same, talking about family and loyalty and friendship and courage, something that seemed to be true of all planets. Finally I finished and announced that we would soon be on our way, and I hoped to see them, or at least their shuttles, alongside us later. I then looked around at my host, who was smiling. My audience were mostly still and silent, with a few still hiding under a nearby table.
Don't worry,
Jennifer told me.
applause tends to be a sign of impending danger in Belobrat. We liked your speech, really.
Do you have a battle souvenir? Geraldine asked, preferably one particular to your planet. Jennifer thought for a few seconds, then nodded to one of her underlings, who walked up to her shyly, holding out what looked like a green piece of metal. What does it do? I asked.
It projects our voices,
Said Jennifer.
It's a little like your Earth megaphone,
She added to Geraldine.
but it's more of a high-pitched screech. Historically, we use it to communicate to the rest of our planet when we're being invaded, which I suppose we are in a way. These aliens don't need to know that it's defensive rather than offensive, though.
What does it sound like? Geraldine asked. A few seconds later, as we were both clutching our ears and the houses on Glabdahardis were shaking, she yelled, "Please make it stop!" Well, that should work, I said, my ears still ringing. We should be on our way now as quickly as possible. After you said your farewells, of course, I continued. 100 Glabdahardis all squeaked their goodbyes at once.
I'm ready,
Said Jennifer.
I will sit in the driver's seat if you like. I'm the only Glabdahardid to ever pass her shuttle license. Oh, almost forgot.
She said, leaping out the shuttle.
Where are we heading next? I will need this gift.
Airglow had got fed up waiting, and after telling herself that it wasn't up to her to find out what was going on and that the others should come to her, I finally got up the courage to take a glance down the stairway. There were the IPO, all huddled round in a circle together. Just like that, she'd been forgotten and excluded from the gang. While Airglow would give them all a piece of her mind, she was still the president's wife for another little while longer and deserved to be treated with respect. Just as she was about to storm downstairs, however, something caught her eye and made her stop. That didn't look like an alien she knew off to the side. Admittedly, as with the shuttles, Airglow had never paid very much attention to aliens that weren't Mrasianarts or Belobrats. She wasn't actually sure what humans looked like, despite being married to a half-one, she realised. But she could at least recognise one of the other species, even if she couldn't pronounce their names or tell you the first thing about them. This one, though, looked different. She was wearing a crown, for one thing, and none of the species did that sort of thing anymore. Even the humans had finally given up on that anachronism. Though they still had a royal family, they tended to wear big silly hats, cook awful biscuits, and present bad reality TV shows. The smaller beings next to the one wearing the crown were all alien and strange too, even in a universe where the term alien didn't really mean much nowadays. Small, red and furry, in multiple different shades. Airglow promptly turned back and went back into her room again. Well, she thought, if they were all in danger, then where was that useless husband of hers then? How dare he not be here, keeping us safe? Maybe it was up to her to do something after all, if her courage didn't fail her. And then she'd tell Eleron off for not rescuing her when he came back all right.
Universal entry paused. AB 544-936-49329. Ground Universal Systems key code. Acting President Eleron. Headline: Mission to Ziggurat 3. Retrieved from the Universal Records Office.
The three of us landed on Ziggurat 3. At least, I thought, heading towards it. I hope it's Ziggurat 3. With those three suns blaring away in the visor, we could have been landing anywhere, and I wouldn't have known. The planet looked not unlike a ball of light itself, twinkling away with a yellow-orange fury that made it seem a little like a furnace. It was too bright for me to see anything, and I feared we might crash land. But luckily for us, the Glabdahardis had developed ultraviolet and even ultra-roulet sight, the next door colour in the spectrum.
We're magnificent predators,
As Jennifer put it, and she was able to clamber over the top of us and steer us down to the planet. Good job you're here. I can't see a thing. How do these clandesprods stand so much sunlight? Geraldine said. Well, I gave Jennifer a hug and told her how scared I'd been till I saw how calm she was in control.
It's nothing.
Blushed the Glabdahardit, turning pink down to her tail.
I just see the world in a different way to the rest of it, that's all.
Yes, that's it, I said. That's what we have that these new aliens don't have. I've been trying to get my head round it all this time to see if my plan will work, and I think it will now. They only have one way of seeing the world. We have at least 10. Plus hybrids, of course. Maybe 100 ways they've never thought of. Characteristically, the Clandespods had organised their world into several neat categories, so it was very easy to work out where the shuttle should park. All of these areas were dressed up in different colours, via natural crystals that blinked on and off as rays from the 3 suns passed across them. Everything on this planet was organic, I noticed, as if the artificial technology from other worlds had barely scratched the surface of this one. But the homegrown technology based on a kind of alien on cords was in constant use and seemed just as powerful as any circuitry. As we landed and I glanced outside, I noticed 2 things out of the corner of my eye in between the bursts of sunlight. One was another statue of Enwyn and Lizzie, this one carved out of the same crystals that form the backbone of Clandesprod society. The other a familiar-looking shuttle parked next to us. It couldn't be, could it? "Auntie C!" I yelled so loudly that Jennifer scurried back under the chair again. At the sound of my voice, a figure came rushing out of the nearby cave, knitting. "Eleron?" she asked before I threw myself into her arms, just avoiding the knitting needles. Here she was, the person I most wanted to see in the universe right now. Well, outside the people we were trying to save anyway, here in front of me. "What on cigarettes are you wearing?" "Long story. Explain later," I said, remembering that I hadn't taken the Belobrat clothes off yet. "But what are you doing here?" "Well," said Auntie C, "after you left for Decreeta, I felt a bit lonely and sorry for myself, and for the first time in my life, I found myself wanting to belong to something. It's part of the Clandespods' heritage, after all, to belong to a clan, as you well know, so I thought I would travel out to see my old cave. I also remember what you said to me when I mentioned wanting to travel around the universe and be the first person to have a picture of themselves taken in front of every endurance fountain in the universe, and thought, well, that might as well be me, and I might as well start here. You really have inspired me, you know. I decided that if you and Ego could travel off to pastures you for the good of the universe, then the least I could do is travel half the distance and back to the planet I grew up on. But what about you? Is this an official business trip? And who are your friends?" "Oh, Auntie C," I said, my face falling. "Have they not told you yet?" "Told me what? I just got here after a long flight and thought I'd pop into my old cave to say hello before making an official appearance. Between you and me, I know there's still a little bit of sadness that I left at all and walked out on the clan I'd been assigned. Not many Clandespods have ever done it. Of course, it's not like it was when Lizzie committed suicide, bless her soul, but it's still very frowned upon, if not unique. I knew I'd get a better reception from my own home clan of creators rather than from the organising one, though, so I went straight there." I looked at my old Sprod parent, sadly. "I have some very bad news, I'm afraid. Very, very, very bad. Aliens have invaded us. They landed on Earth and were last seen heading to Decreeta to take over the IPO and conquer us all. It sounds as if their tradition and alien code dictates that they can only hand themselves over to me, though." "Well then," said Auntie C, reading slightly, but trying not to let it show, "it's a good thing you escaped then, and a very sensible idea coming here where my clan can protect you. Is Echo in the shuttle?" "No," I said, and my face fell again. "She's still on Decreeta, and I'm only president for the next few days. It all went wrong." "Even better," said Auntie C, trying to put her usual brave face on things. "Then it won't be you having to deal with things. I remember saying to your mother—" But we never found out what Auntie C said to Eleanor, as just then an official Clandesprod delegation walked out of what I presume was a political clan cave and greeted us, each of them wearing the same sort of fake smiles I only ever saw in my homeworld during right-wing political broadcasts, fake pyramid scheme rallies, or really excruciating coffee chains. "President Eleron," the figure at the head of them said, and after I nodded he carried on. "We are all so pleased that you are here, and we greet you in peace. I am Lance, elected intergalactic representative of the Clandesprod political clan. JJJJJ has been in contact with me about your plight. We thought it was all a bit of a joke at first, what with a tale of mortal danger and a request to start carving 10-foot fires out of the materials you'd sent us. We thought all the relative neighbours were teasing us, but here you are. I even see you brought snacks." And Lance reached his hand out for Jennifer's bag of goodies, "which I received very gratefully, with relish, but not the Earth sort of relish, of course, in jest." He held his hand out to Geraldine, who took it, confused. Lance continued, "Our best sculptor Louise is working on our legs right now. That's the sort of sentence you don't get to say very often, is it? And should be finished soon. Very fetching they look too.
Bravo, you and your companions must dine with us here.
With that, Lance waved us to a nearby table in the shade. I still felt sick, though, from the sunlight and all our previous meals, and both Geraldine and Jennifer seemed to feel the same. Any chance we could leave the meal for another time, I said. We could really do with getting into the shade, and I would love to catch up with my Auntie C here.
Of course, said Lance, bowing low. As our guests wish. Please make yourself at home on our planet, and think of it as your own. Leave only footprints, take only memories, dance like nobody is watching, beware of the garbage draft, and make sure you're all back home again by tea time. Have a nice day.
And he's put his arms around us all and yelled,
Go get him, tea, please, am I right?
before wandering off, leaving us perplexed.
I'm sorry, said Auntie C. I had to get you away from him. He's the head of a hospitality and diplomacy clan, and I confess it's not a clan I like to spend much time with. It gives our planet a very bad name. I remember a time just before I left when that clan decided to reach out to the Grumpus and to deliver the more personalised party packs full of the most awful, sentimental, flowery prose. That didn't go down very well with such a direct, not to say abrupt species, and it very nearly started an intergalactic war. I don't know why we do it, because most planets look on it with disdain. There's only the Galactic who don't seem to mind it, and I think you're all just being polite, poor things, aren't you? And there was another time when Lance praised the Mechion ambassador for giving 110%, and the poor chap nearly had a breakdown trying to explain that that was theoretically impossible, and would rewrite the laws of mathematics. It's all very nice and well to be encouraging, but after a while it just sounds false, so we encourage them not to use it in diplomatic circles. But they never listen, discouragingly. Now, who are you all?
I introduced my Sprog parent to my two new friends, after shaking hands and wings with us all at once, and dropping her ever-present knitting into the bargain. Auntie C ushered us out of the sun into the nearest cave, which happened to belong to the storytelling clan. Goodness, said Geraldine, it's not what I expected.
You away?
Asked Auntie C. These caves are so luxurious. Central heating, carpets, furniture, crystals hanging from every wall, rows upon rows of teapots. If we were still on Earth, I would call it plush. This isn't how cavemen live back home.
Oh, we're a bit more civilised than that, dear,
said Auntie C, beaming, having learnt a lot about Earth history from Eleanor.
Just because we don't believe in manufacturing our own resources doesn't mean we can't adopt the ones we have to suit us. Now, my dears, you can talk to me more openly here, away from the clandestine officials. We won't be bothered for a while.
In an instant, her smiling features changed to a look of sudden seriousness.
Eleron, how bad is it really?
I sighed. Very, very, very bad.
As bad as during Insurgence?
Worse, I frowned. If only because of the amount of people it will affect, which is everybody, not just one planet. Auntie C pulled out her knitting, the way she always did when she was worried about something.
But you're safe, she said. You're not hurt.
No, I replied. I wasn't there when these aliens arrived. There was an argument. The others didn't want me to go to Earth, but I insisted on going, and so I was there when they were travelling to Decreeta.
Good job you were, said Auntie C. I always said you were more gumption than the rest of the IPO put together. There were always a bunch of corrupt so-and-sos, and I see nothing much has changed. Why, when I think of all the lies we told during their election campaigns, I could cry, and clandestines don't even have any tear ducts. I don't understand why politics is always turned into some sort of vicious game. Telling the truth always works perfectly well on Mars. Admittedly, we might not have the most booming economy like the Mechions or the Belobrats, but we all live in peace and fairness and harmony and... What was I saying?
She trailed off, having lost the train of thought. I agree, said Geraldine, learning to intervene in Auntie C's lengthy speeches impressively quickly. Eleron's speeches were so inspiring. The politicians always lie on my world too, and I don't know why. I laughed cynically. Fat lot of good inspirational speeches are going to be against these aliens, though. Geraldine says she saw them, Auntie C. They're ruthless. They evaporated a human without so much as looking at him, concurred Geraldine.
Maybe he was eating one of those strange earth concoctions the rest of the universe can't stomach, like meat on toast. I know you though, Eleron, said Auntie C, stopping in the cave corridor to stare at me intensely. I've known you since you were born, and I know you'll have a plan to get us out of this, even if it's one you don't have any faith in. I do, though. I always have, and I'm right behind you in whatever it is. Those idiots in the Democratic clan are talking about some president asking them for giant sculpted legs, but that can't possibly be right. The sunlight's clearly been getting to them, poor things.
I explained my plan, as best I could, mostly to Auntie C's disbelief, but here in the darkness of the cave, surrounded by so many people relying on me to save them, somehow it felt even dafter than it had telling Geraldine and JJJJJ. "Dear boy," sighed Auntie C, tapping me on the head as she waddled towards me. "That's certainly a unique way of handling a unique situation." "I don't know what else we can do," I confessed. "Me neither," said Geraldine. Looking round for a distraction, she pointed to a corner of the cave and said, "Wait, don't I know that figure?" She was staring at a portrait that had been etched and placed in front of an ornate urn. "Me too," I said, recognising the figure. "That must be Liz's burial place." Jennifer squeaked at us in confusion, so I explained. "The clandestine in Endurance, who felt so out of place in the academic clan she took her own life, only to meet up with a human in the afterlife and initiate the universe's first true interstellar contact. She thought she was the most useless being in the universe, but she ended up being the most important." "Well," said Auntie C thoughtfully, "that's how the legend goes, but it wasn't strictly true, of course. We now know that the Belobrats invaded the Galapagos a long time ago. The Belobrats were at war with Mars even before that. Well, there's a planet revolving around the brightest sun of their galaxy. All sorts of people contacted the Habitats, and they simply chose to ignore them. I won't even go into how many of us made contact with the Earth, but it was kept quiet by their governments of the day. However, there's no getting away from the fact that most of the universe think of this as the time of the first contact, yes." "My goodness," I said, leaning towards Liz's grave and squinting as best I could in the near darkness. "If only she'd known what she started, almost centuries ago. Is there anyone here who remembers her?" Auntie C coughed. "Yes, well, I remember her as it happens. She was a quiet girl, didn't say a lot, nobody special. The only time I really interacted with her, she told me I talked too much. Why woman no? What I do, as it happens, talk a little more than the average clan, is probably true, but no more than anyone else in the organisation clan. Somebody has to issue instructions after all. We all like to think of ourselves as friendly." "I wonder what she would think of us now," I said, "on the run from a threat to the universe she saved. Were all her efforts in vain, do you think? Would we be safer, having never met each other? Would the Agrosians have assumed the Earth were on their own and gone home?" "Perhaps," said Geraldine comfortingly, "but then without Emwyn and Lizzie, the Earth would have been destroyed, and all those billions of people would have lost their lives. We have to believe that we are better together, but for the most part, I think we are. It's lonely alone." "Well, well," said Auntie C, beaming, and even Jennifer nodded along. "I can see the Earth has come a long way since my last visit." "One thought," I said, puzzled. "Wasn't Liz's shrine in the education clan once upon a time? That's where she spent most of her life." "Yes," smiled Auntie C, "there is a shrine to her there too, but this is the clan she always wanted to join, and it seemed only right she should be here also, as an inspiration to all the artistic clandestines who pass through and feel they're being ignored. A reminder that everyone has a chance of success, even when they're in the wrong cave and or dead. Now, if you just carry on a little way, there's something else I want to show you. It's where I used to go to meditate, even in the days before I moved to Mars. You can see why I chose to move there, can't you?" As we walked further and further into the cave, the bright sunlight, and even the artificial one, began to dissipate more and more. Before too long we were walking in total darkness, and I had to tap my sprod parent on the back in order to slow her down and not get lost. "Sorry," she said, "I forget how odd this must seem for visitors being in the dark, but it's such a regular way of life for us to rest our eyes every so often. But trust me, you'll be glad when you've seen it once you're there." "But where are the lights?" Jennifer said, bewildered. "Where's your famous crystalline technology? You're so far ahead of us, technologically speaking, in the open, it hurts. But have you never heard of light?" "We won't leave where we're going," cackled the clandestine, seeming more like her old self again. "This part of the cave probably hasn't changed for thousands of years," I breathed in awe as we walked, aware of how modern the buildings on Mars all were by comparison. "Millions," breathed in Auntie C. "You'll see soon enough." "But I don't understand. Why not adapt this part of the cave to make life easier for you, the way you did the communal entrance?" said Geraldine. "Indeed," I added. "There's more to life than having things easy," said Auntie C. "That's your Earth side talking, both of you. That whole idea of altering your environment to fit yourself. How much better it is to fit yourself to your environment. Come see, and somebody pick the poor glad to harness up and carry her. Even with a different eye, she seems to be afraid of the dark, poor thing." and leading me through a final cavern hidden at the back, totally away from all the sunlight, I began to see what she meant. For there, by the light of a flickering candle, hundreds of illustrations drawn on the wall suddenly came to life and moved. Or so it seemed at first, so much so that poor Jennifer went scurrying off down the corridor and had to be picked up by Geraldine. I soon realised that the figures weren't actually real, but just for a second, that was exactly how it seemed. Instead, as the flame Auntie C carried ebbed and flowed about the cave, there came the illusion that the pictures were moving, backwards and forwards, and the flickering flame drew out different positions and angles on the wall, and made different aspects of each drawing come to life in turn. It was mesmerising, like going back in time, and being witness to a skill that modern-day beings simply didn't possess. Simultaneously, it made us immediately aware of the great passing of time between the people who had carved them, and yet also seemed as futuristic as any of our greatest technologies. Auntie C raised the candle up to her face suddenly and asked me, "Do you like it?" "Yes," I said, still awestruck. "I thought I knew everything about Sigurus III, but I don't remember reading about these caves. It's as if the drawings are alive, a literal piece of moving history." "Well," said Auntie C, "cataloguing them on the Universalist static pictures didn't do them justice, really. Sometimes you have to experience something to know what it's all about, rather than just read up on it. That's the one thing we've got a little bit wrong on Mars, if you ask me. We accept what people tell us a bit too much. Another thing we got wrong is that no one does ask me, even though I've travelled more than anyone, did I?" Geraldine interrupted. "But who drew these amazing pictures? Can we meet them?" At this, Auntie C looked sad. "I'm afraid you can't, my dears, for the simple reason that the clan who lived in this cave died out more than 1 billion years ago. We never knew their names, as their tribe disappeared long before those of us on the other side of Sigurus III ever met them. But they left a mark on this cave for all eternity, and all their descendants. The story goes that, back when life was new, we Clandestros were afraid of walking out into the sunshine because it was too bright, so everyone kept to the caves they'd been born in, and only met up as a species much, much later." "I can see why," interrupted Geraldine dryly, her eyes still slightly blinded. "So what happened," continued Auntie C, "was that life grew parallel but differently in each and every cave. By the time the Tech Clan invented a crystal machine that would give them protection from our 3 suns and visited the other caves, they'd all grown up very differently in separation, each with particular strengths of their own. The Tech Clan discovered a cave full of politicians, and another filled with organisers, another had educated themselves beyond all others. One cave had developed the most amazing food, another was really good at decor, another art, while they themselves had gadgets galore that other clans could only dream of. The day they came together was amazing. Every clan learned so much from each other in one go, and proudly showed off what they had been producing for millennia in isolation in their caves. Sadly, the creative clan that lived here had died out, perhaps through starvation, or through artistic differences. No one really knows. But they left us a great deal to study, which gave us another whole new scope for a way to live that many Clandespods have adopted since. Slowly the Clandespods learned to mingle, and didn't necessarily leave the lives their families had before them in their own caves. After that, whenever a new generation were born, they were shown round each of the caves in turn, and given the option of which clan to be adopted by, and grow up in. And then they spent the majority of their days in the cave that's been chosen for them. Though I was an organiser Clandespod, as you know, Eleron, this has always been my favourite cave to spend time and meditate in, although none of the clans really suited me, to be honest. I've always been far more at home on Mars. I like to think that my ancestors came from an explorers clan which, rather than stay put, scattered themselves all over the universe, and are still out there somewhere." "Amazing," I breathed, still looking round the cave in awe. "To think that life began all that time ago, and the mark is still left here." "You see," I said, turning to Geraldine and Jennifer, "this is why being part of the IPO is such a good thing, and why we are better together, because we are like the Clandespods writ large, only with different planets to learn from instead of caves. We can pull the best of everything we have and help each other. We don't lose what we had separately at all, as the Prexiteers claim, as the individual identity of ours never really gets lost. It just becomes embraced by a greater set of people. Our planets are all like these different caves, all growing up apart, but together our knowledge makes us stronger than it did separately. Everybody should be here to learn this, from across the universe." "Don't look at me," laughed Geraldine. "I voted for you, remember?" "And now," I said sadly, "we have to work together again, or everything, always millennia of history on every planet, might be for nothing. Just then we heard a call. It was Lance inquiring after our health and telling us that our giant legs were ready, and I sadly trundled back to the main Clandesprod square with all my friends, old and new, with too much of my Mrasianbrat brain to think about. The knobbly legs were ready, and so was the audience awaiting Clandesprods, who all stuck their heads out of their respective caves and listened in rapt silence as I delivered my speech. It was much the same as before, with the addition this time of how the universe was all one big clan that lived in a cave the size of the universe, and we needed to help each other, a line that seemed to go down particularly well. After taking questions, most of them strangely similar to those on Glad the Hardest, about family and danger and other options, I inspected the 10-foot Clandesprod legs, thanked Lance, and after taking a present I was told was for the next planet, I sadly turned to Auntie C. "I guess this is goodbye. Again," I said, trying to hold back the tears. "Stay safe and remember me to the rest of Mars."
Nonsense, said Auntie C. What kind of sprod parent would I be to let you go wandering off into danger? Just you and this ragtag band of knock-kneed aliens? Why, your mum and your dad would never speak to me in the next life if I was to do that. No, Eleron, we live and we die together, and I have to play my part in this unfolding crisis, whatever that may be. I can't possibly do that sitting at home with my feet and tail up, can I? Besides, it's up to us elders to protect you whippersnappers, always.
"But it's dangerous," I said. "I need to know you'll be safe."
And if you fail and these aliens are as bad as you say, where exactly is going to be safe in the universe then? Tell me that then. What? Oh yes.
My sprod parent had a point, but every point she made, I could say the same. What would my parents say to me in the next life if they'd known I'd taken our beloved Auntie C into harm's way?
"Oh, one more thing, Eleron,"
said Auntie C, and she popped over to a shuttle and dug around in the boot, her Clandesprodic legs kicking in the air.
"I know I had it here somewhere. I really must clean up my shuttle, but, well, it's all a bit different when you're on your own. I wasn't expecting visitors. Aha, here it is."
And she pulled out a curious-looking box.
"It's a weather-control panel I left here when I moved to Mars, and my clan have just handed back to me, bless us all. Why I've been keeping it all this time, I'll never know."
She explained in a hurry, to no one in particular.
"Cigarettes free is such constant sunlight that we found it necessary to adapt the weather so that we had regular rain of different chemicals at set times. This generation have far greater abilities of this than I ever had, though. This is just an obsolete toy now, really. Let's see if it still works."
Geraldine and I were suddenly and inexplicably left spluttering under an intense rainstorm that arrived out of nowhere. Poor Jennifer, still clutched in Geraldine's arms, had turned into a giant fluffy ball.
"Hurrah!" said Auntie C. "This will fox those alien chappies waited, Eleron. Eleron?"
I spluttered something incoherent, while Lance was sent to fetch towels.
"Oh," said Auntie C, shamefaced. "I thought you'd be pleased."
"If it's half as effective on Decreeta, it will be very convincing indeed, Auntie C."
"Achoo!"
I replied. Said a very cute and fluffy Jennifer, diplomatically, squeezing over to let the Clandesprod into the front seat. "You will be careful though, won't you? You're the closest to family I've got left," I told her.
"Same here," replied Auntie C. "You're my family, Eleron, and I feel it even more after visiting my old clan. I just won't let you face this alone. It's bad enough those poor creatures are trapped on Decreeta right now."
Geraldine could see that I was about to start another long argument, so she just hopped into the shuttle and said, "Let's go quick, or there won't be a universe left to save."
"Goodbye," said Lance. "Good luck. Have a nice day, y'all. And as we sail Cigarettes free, may your clan always be proud to have you as a member, and may you always be the sort of member your clan would be proud to have."
"The same to you," we cried in return. We were getting used to this now. Leaving Jennifer to take the controls again, we waved goodbye to our hosts and took off again into the dazzling, brightened sky.
"Talk!
Screamed Queen Calixta into the face of a shaken Doris.
Tell me everything about your president."
He's not their president, O Queen,
To the simpering Bob.
The Earth isn't in the Intergalactic Peace Federation. It pulled out yesterday, officially.
Queen Calixta turned on the Earth leader.
"You mean you lied to me?"
Doris shook with fright, so much so her blonde wig fell off, revealing that she was bald.
"We'd
only just left the IPO. The paperwork hadn't gone through when we took off, and I've forgotten what day it was. I'm only a token leader, really, of one poxy country, not the Earth at all. I'm a patsy. Practically everyone knows that the Earth will rejoin the IPO in a few years. The minute the shortages start to bite and people realise that we all lied to them. And it's the only logical solution to the mess my party has made. We'll probably rejoin at a greater financial cost too. We'll all have made our money by then, though, so we won't mind. I mean, who in the universe needs the Earth after all? We're nobody special, ha ha ha.
Then why did you leave?
Asked Queen Calixta, shocked.
I've been working on myself.
Drawled Horace. To get into power, hissed Doris. The way I saw it, I had 8 years of being in charge and making money off my business, but we're all set to gain from Brexit, living at large in a nice posh house they gave me to rule Earth, and earning millions on my salary, and charging billions on expense accounts before anyone realised that everything I said was just empty rhetoric. And when it's all over, there'll still be a precious few who will still vote for me and support me because they're too ashamed to admit that they were wrong, and I was just fleecing them all the time. They'll have to tell themselves to keep believing in me, or the truth is too hard to bear. But in years to come, people will forget and think of me as a lovable rogue, and I'll get to write biographies about statesmen way more important than me, and they'll invite me on chat shows and give me book deals and all sorts of things.
So you are the leader of Earth?
Asked Queen Calixta.
Yes.
Sighed Doris, defeated. Much good did it do me. I was only in the job a couple of weeks, and now all this has happened. It's not fair. I was doing such a good job. My popularity polls were only on minus 199, the best my party had managed in centuries.
Then sign your planet over to me.
Cackled Queen Calixta, as without a moment's reflection Doris signed a curious stone-like bit of parchment that glowed a non-colour.
From now on, Earth will be renamed Agrosia 111. Its resources will be mine. Its people will become my slaves, and anyone who tries to rise up against me will be destroyed.
Wait,
said Horace, thinking quickly.
technically the Earth is still in the IPO until both Doris and Eleron have signed their names on the form. Or Doris may have signed, but Eleron hasn't yet, so the Earth cannot be handed over to anyone yet.
Queen Calixta stared at the Habitat thoughtfully.
You had better be telling me the truth, alien being, or it will be the worse for you. And I'm not at all sure I believe you.
Even so, she put the parchment down and placed Horace and Doris back with the others, just to be sure.
Universal entry, pause, AD 544-936-49344. Mars Universal Systems Geek Code, acting President Eleron. Headline, Mission to Meteon 5, retrieved from Universal Records Office.
On the shuttle, we filled Auntie C in about our adventures so far. She asked where we were going next, and that she hoped it was one of the planets she hadn't been to yet. But I explained that because of the Universal, we didn't feel we were able to say out loud. She soon recognised Meteon 5 when it loomed into view on our screen, however, and nearly said as much before Geraldine managed to stop her by digging her in the ribs and making a drop of knitting. Just a precaution, the human apologised, but Auntie C didn't seem to mind, as she fished under a seat for her algebra wool. I have to say I'm amazed at the speed of a shuttle, Eleron. Is it new? It looks as if it runs on good old clandestine solar power too. Better for the universe than those other engine thingies. I'm pleased to see the IPO are still concerned about environmental damage, even in a universe where the Mechions could reverse pollution at the press of a button. Why, if only they'd had more of that on my day. I'm not sure the Earth would have survived without it. Yes, I said. In fact, funnily enough, we should see quite a few of his shuttles soon, as it was a gift to the IPO from the Met. I was nearly knocked out of my seat by my companion. Sorry, I whispered, but Geraldine just laughed and hauled me back onto my seat. I'm very impressed by the speed you're going with those opposable hooves, Geraldine continued, talking to a new companion. Do all clandestines knit? Oh, no, my dear, I never had any interest in my youth, but when we get to a certain stage in life, we go through something called the clanopause. It gives us a sudden interest in knitting out of nowhere, and makes us grow an extra horn for storing wool on the top of our heads. Just one of those quirks of genetics and evolution, as it means there are always enough elder clandestines around to swaddle the young. I don't think you have that on Earth, do you? And if you think that's weird, you should see what happens to the men. No, Geraldine laughed. On my planet there's an even stranger genetic quirk that makes most people take up golf at a certain age. What's that, dear? The clandestine asked, interested. Hitting balls into little holes across a big field. That's nice, dear, Auntie C continued, knitting away. How pointless and alien of you. But I suppose every species has its little quirks. I'm so relieved that we aren't travelling for a long time. The way the shuttles always were back in my day. Those seats most definitely weren't designed with a bigger clandestine frame in mind. Why, when I met your mother for the first time on board a shuttle from Earth to Mars Eleron, our trip lasted for weeks on end. What a journey that was. Why, I remember like it was yesterday. But none of us got to hear what our clandestine companion remembered. As just then the shuttle engines fired up and drowned her out. Mrasianbrat 5 was a very different sort of planet to the others we'd visited so far. Everything was very streamlined and artificial, like the inside of a circuit board laid out across the planet, though most of it was coloured a light grey when viewed from a distance. This world was, I knew from my years of poring over the Universal when I should have been sleeping, insomnia being the Humrasianart's worst enemy, the fifth planet this species had made their home. Their species was constantly searching for a way to better themselves, and the search had developed 4 earlier worlds before taking over a new and convenient empty planet and turning it into their latest headquarters, with the existing spheres then working as a sort of supportive colony of the main planet. There was already talk, I knew, of moving to a 6th planet in the next solar system, but so far every year when it was put to a democratic vote, the Mrasians had decided to stay put for now. I could see why. Compared to the rest of the universe, Mrasianbrat 5 seemed to have everything. As we came into land, I could see a whole street of banks containing not money, but every sort of technological part going, as people swapped and bargained and haggled and worked for the parts they needed to adapt their homes and their belongings to their own grand design. There was no need to search for a shuttle landing pad here either, as we were directed in by a giant fluorescent arrow that led us to a Mrasian on a giant screen that folded out in front of us, delivering a number and pointing where to park. The shuttle set down beside a similarly giant digital construct, which I recognised as a fountain containing likenesses of Edwin and Lizzie, with flowing digital ice cubes rather than running water. The pair looked more like robots than the way they were usually depicted, but had recognisably the same heads as the familiar figures. Quite what the Mrasians did with a digital fountain I wasn't sure, but then that seemed to sum up a lot of Mrasian culture from what I'd read on the Universal, and the few of the beings I'd actually met passing through Mars. But sometimes they were just being clever to show off, rather than inventing something for the common good. Of course, I mused, I knew more than a few Mrasians thought that about the Mrasianarts too, and that as most of our society ran inside our heads, we didn't even have a large digital monstrosity to show for it. The 4 of us got out and looked around for our hosts, who arrived on what looked like a portable hovercraft, encircled by lots of other Mrasians, who were all placid and quiet and waving their robotic limbs in greeting, clearly pleased to see us, even if they lacked the passion of the other worlds we'd visited so far.
Eleron Company?
Asked the head Mrasian, who scanned our likenesses, though whether for confirmation or to check for undesirables or aliens in disguise, I wasn't quite sure.
Welcome to Mrasianbrat 5,
He continued, putting his gadget away.
We greet you in the name of peace. My name is Marad, and this is my associate, Quincy. Kindly inform us if we can be of any assistance to you in your grave deed.
Thank you, I replied. We all greet you in peace too, though I wish peace was why we were here. Well, I cleared his throat, quite literally by undoing a bolt.
Don't worry, President Eleron. JJJJ has been in contact with us and told us about everything that has been happening. It has been most exciting. It is the first time this century that we have felt compelled to drop our general daily routine and broadcast your speech on a loop instead. We realise that time is of the essence in your quest, and that your time is running short, and while we aren't certain of the logic of your plan, it is logical to at least try and help your efforts as a first response. You will find our statuesque contribution to your project laser cut and awaiting further instructions in the holding bay over there.
Mrasian pointed with his technological gizmo that lit up in the shape of arrows that directed behind us.
For now, though, there is an audience waiting for you.
I gave my speech for a 4th time, this time emphasising the logic of the idea that if one of our planets fell, then the rest would most likely soon follow, and how these aliens had weaponry that even the Mrasians didn't have. They must be very powerful indeed. When I finished, most of the audience took their limbs off and waved them in the air. A favour greeting on Mrasian I knew. After being led away to see and approve a Mrasian part of the sculpture, an anti-gravity lifting device moved a giant Mrasian torso effortlessly into the back of our shuttle.
After our planetary battle souvenir,
The ambassador continued.
please take this box with our thanks.
What does it do? I asked, studying it.
The box is powered by Wi-Fi lasers and emits a ginormous explosion. Not enough to cause anyone serious harm, but certainly enough to get their attention, shall we say. Ha ha ha.
We used to find it most useful during the wars against your ancestors.
He let an explosion off now, just above Jennifer's head, and the Glabdahardit ran back to the shuttle, squeaking. Well, that stop was easy, said Geraldine. We'll be off again in no time.
We pride ourselves on being efficient.
Nodded Mallard.
While your shuttle has been parked and in stasis, it's also been automatically refueled.
Any chance we could borrow one of his anti-gravitational devices, I asked. It would be invaluable to us in our quest.
But of course,
Mallard replied.
I firmly suggest that Quincy, one of our greatest technological brains, be allowed to go with you in your mission, so that we can say Mechion played their part in saving the universe, and our traditional farewell greeting.
And the Mechion held up his hand, so that there was a split halfway across the 4 fingers of his palm, so that there were 2 pairs of 2 fingers stuck together.
Oops, my mistake, wrong gesture,
He said, and instead held his hands out so that they met in the middle, and he waggled his fingers.
May your lives be busy, may your minds be peaceful, may your thoughts be still, may your emotions be in check, may your fears be in limbo, may your endeavour end in success.
Quincy shyly stretched out his technological arm towards us.
Greetings, Humrasianart, human, Mrasianbrat, and Glabdahardit.
He said,
I will be honoured to be part of the team, if you will have me.
and his eyes lit up artificially, as if he had heart emojis in them. Not half as solid as we are, sonny, said Auntie C, slapping him on the back and making his digital arms fall off. Welcome aboard, Team Peace. We're building up a real army of aliens now to combat those alien aliens. Why, I remember the time when... Oh, I almost forgot, said Geraldine, interrupting. Here is your gift from Ziggurat Free, as she handed over a parcel that seemed to encompass a cluster of different coloured crystals.
Perfect,
Said Mallard, as pleased and emotional as I'd ever seen a Mechion.
this is exactly the sort of supplies we were running low on. I must send my acknowledgement to Decreeta France. You have reminded me too, here are some legal documents we are sending as a gift to you for your next journey. I know that seems like an odd thing to send on, but believe it or not, it's exactly what our neighbours in space seem to like the best. And who are we to argue?
We all thanked him and got back into our shuttle. Oh, complained Auntie C, I was looking forward to a long chat. Well, I'll just have to have one with you, Quincy. You sit next to me. I took back what I said earlier. The look on Quincy's face was the most emotional I'd ever seen on a Mechion, as she nattered the night away. Figuring Doris had been telling the truth and knew very little about Eleron, Queen Calixta decided to move on to someone who did know him. But Habridat seemed to know him best, so she arranged for further interrogation.
Tell us more about this president of yours. What did he look like?
Queen Calixta was growing bored of waiting for this president to arrive. She was beginning to wonder if his strange aliens were trying to cheat her, but so far every one of them had told her the same thing, that Eleron had rushed off to save Earth. Well, it wouldn't do him much good, but it sounded like the sort of thing a president would do. Somehow the idea of him surrendering to her in battle, above the broken sky of a world she had just taken over, seemed more dignified for the history books than just waiting here twiddling her tail. Perhaps she should go and find him. Queen Calixta knew from her last visit there that most Earthlings tended to look much the same, but this Eleron must have some sort of distinguishing features.
He's a hybrid creature, ma'am. Mixed race.
Said Horace, trying to be as vague as he dared and playing for time.
What does that mean?
She said.
He has 2 members of 2 different species as his parents.
Queen Calixta scoffed at this idea. It flew in the face of all her millennia of pure breeding and showed again that this half of the universe was degenerate and therefore easy to conquer.
But he's easy to find, this Eleron.
Oh, very,
Said Horace.
As far as we know, he's the only one out there of his combination of species.
Is he very tall?
Said Horace, trying to be as vague as he could and wanting his boss to seem somehow more threatening than he was.
He's certainly an unusual size.
Then he should stand out.
Said the Queen.
Those creatures there on Earth must be helping him if he has not returned to you yet, which means legally, under the Agrosian Code of Conduct, I'm allowed to destroy certain things on a planet harbouring or aiding a fugitive, even if I can't harm any actual beings themselves, except in defence against the ones who try and stop me, that is. It makes sense that this presidential being would have returned home, although from what you tell me, this specimen is 2 separate homes, so I think I am in my rights to attack them both. Not enough to destroy them totally, of course, in case it contains something that will be of value to us in the future. In any case, that wouldn't be in keeping with the Agrosian ethical code, but certainly it will cause enough damage to give this creature's attention, and anyone harbouring this fugitive. Now, what other planet does this Eleron belong to? Punch its coordinates up on this universal device.
Horace was defeated. He knew that he ought to keep quiet and tell this wretched alien nothing. But he also knew that any stall he might give Eleron enough time to do something to save them. And he thought soberly to himself, any time spent blowing up other planets meant longer time before his own dear world of Habradas would be destroyed. And this Queen of theirs did say she wasn't going to specifically kill life. After struggling with his conscience, Horace looked up at Calixta and said in a quiet voice,
Mars,
he said, as he found the relevant pages on the Universal.
Good,
said Queen Calixta.
Earth shall be our first port of call, as I know how to get there. Mars will follow soon after. The other 8 planets can wait until later.
Then, as lightly as if she was going shopping, Queen Calixta declared,
Come, Hive, let us go conquering.
She turned round to stare at what remained of the IPO in general, and Horace in particular.
Don't think you are free to go, though. I know from what you have all been whispering that you would become president when the time runs out on Eleron, even though I still don't know how long this few days lasts. You are my plan B, so it seems apt that I'm leaving my hive bee here to keep an eye on you. Don't do anything I don't want you to do. Although if you do, my hive has orders to eliminate you all.
With a simple swish of the tail and a slight scrunching of the neck to fit through the door, Queen Calixta was gone. The IPO looked at each other blankly, feeling beaten.
Let us hope that Eleron has been sensible and is no longer on Earth,
said Lawrence, and the others agreed, but without as much confidence as they might have hoped. After all, Eleron hadn't been elected for being sensible, but for being wildly impractical. Upstairs, Airglow watched the shuttle leave from her bedroom window and felt a little of her old bravado come back to her. Well, that was all a bit odd, and she was still annoyed that nobody had been to fetch her or tell her what was going on. Now Airglow would show his inferior creatures they couldn't treat her like this. She was going to make an entrance like no other. Looking through her wardrobe for the dress she had worn to the party a few days before, she went to her favourite mirror and admired the way it showed off her figure, and especially her tail. A few minutes later, and she looked as good as she had ever looked, her costume topped off by some very expensive jewellery she had got Eleron to buy her on account, and a very fetching headscarf that had been all the rage on Mars just before they'd left. Feeling very regal, she looked in the mirror and paused, surprised at what she saw. Inwardly, temporarily, she'd felt like the most beautiful creature in the world, and had expected to see this matched in her favourite mirror. Instead, she looked small and haggard, more than a little like Eleron if she were honest with herself. If she hadn't known better, she would think she looked worried too. But that was ridiculous. These aliens had clearly gone. And anyway, just because those aliens came from a different side of the universe didn't mean they didn't have manners. And she was the wife of the president of this entire half of the universe. They had to recognise her importance. After all, she was in a good position here. She was naturally high up the pecking order when it came to hostages, but had little responsibility to these aliens, whoever they might be. Inevitably, they would see that, wouldn't they? Telling herself off for a moment of doubt, Airglow walked off down the stairs, feeling supreme. 15 heads turned to look at her as she walked down the stairs. The IPO had all but forgotten about her and tried to warn her to turn back. The hive were greatly surprised, first of all, to see another creature that looked like 2 of the others they had imprisoned stuck together, and to see her walking down these strange, uneven lines. They had wondered what they were, but hadn't wanted to say anything to their queen, for fear of looking stupid. Agrosians was such a flat world that they had never even considered inventing stairs. Airglow was already aware, by the second step down, that she might have just made a colossal mistake, but still she carried on, until she was at the bottom of the stairs, ignoring the increasingly desperate cries from Horace to turn back and flee. After all, these unknown creatures didn't seem much of a threat. She would have found them small and comical, and would have laughed in another setting, but mirth didn't seem to fit with the regal role she was playing, so she managed not to. Josh turned towards her and asked who she was.
I am Airglow,
She intoned grandly.
the wife of the Intergalactic Peace President. Who might you be?
But the hive struggled with the translations of at least 2 of those words. Their partners were chosen for them by their queen, so they had no concept of wives, and their breeding and history over several millennia meant they had almost no understanding of the concept of peace. They understood the word president all right. They also knew the word hostage. Excitedly they gathered round Airglow and tied her up, putting her with the others.
What an amazing stroke of luck,
Said Gosh.
Is there any way to treat your First Lady?
Eglo asked angrily.
Last lady, you mean?
Said Josh, and the other 4 hive members all laughed.
Oh, wait till Queen Calixta hears,
Said Wash.
This one sounds just like her.
Said Posh.
So many airs and graces, what? Ha ha.
Now shut up and eat some food.
Said Nosh. Eglo looked huffily at the broken IPO.
Why didn't any of you try to save me?
She asked him.
That's not very gallant of you, and certainly not helpful.
I'm getting cold,
Murmured Horace. The broken Bob cried out.
Calamity, we're all doomed. I don't suppose an alien will see much distinction between a ruler and his wife. The minute they come back, we shall all be enslaved along with everyone we ever knew, or worse.
To his captors he cried out.
Work with me. I can save you. I'm not like those others. I'm important. Special. The others just do my bidding, but it's me that has all the power really. Ha ha ha. I can give you great sections of the universe, I can. Only spare my life.
nonsense.
Said Horace, trying to get Bob to calm down and stop drawing attention to himself.
This hasn't changed anything, Bob. You're forgetting that in 3 days I become president anyway, and I can sign everything and everyone owns these aliens instead. We just have to hope that Eleron can manage to do something in that time. Yes,
Said Agro, dreamily, and not quite sure what was going on.
Eleron will think of something. I have every faith in him, and always have. Where is he anyway? I thought he would be back by now.
I wouldn't blame him if he ran far away and kept going, said Lawrence sadly. The way we treated him was appalling. He's a good soul, really. He gave me some excellent sound bites when I was in charge of publicity.
All right, I'm wrong,
said Horace.
He is greedy, but not the sort of person I would wish the fate of the universe to be resting on right now. I think you're wrong about him running away, though. I think he'll come back and try to save us. I just have an awful feeling that he'll do something impractical and fail. The idealists always do, even when it's easier just to shut your eyes and give up.
Echo walloped him as hard as she could while tied up.
That's my husband you're talking about,
She snarled.
as well as your president, the most brilliant mind there ever was. I don't know about saving the rest of you, but I can guarantee he's going to come back and save me.
And to herself she whispered.
Oh, Eleron, all that time together. I never even got to properly tell you, but I love you.
Universal entry, pause, AB 54493649366. Branch Universal Systems Key Code, Acting, President Eleron. Headline, Mission to Malaysia, retrieved from Universal Records, Office.
Echo, I'm coming to save you. Oh. It had been such an intense vision, like the olden days when I was telepathically linked to Airglow. We had learned quickly that in order to really feel one another's presence, we had to be doing something that caused us to be extremely emotional, whatever that something happened to be. What on Mars was happening to my beloved? Suddenly, somehow, being back with Auntie C again had reminded me of just how close-knit our wonderful little family had been, and how much Airglow truly meant to me. In my absence, her stature had grown inside my head to the point where any harsh words that had been spoken between us were minor indeed, and overpowered by the love we had for one another. I was more determined than ever to save her, even if I couldn't save the universe. For weren't they the same thing anyway to my heart? Were you dreaming again, Eleron? Inquired Geraldine, as slowly, painfully, I tried to wake up. I know you didn't get much sleep last night. Oh, Rennie died probably. If I remember rightly, that was how he used to get when he had his telepathic vision, said Auntie C. They gave us quite a turn when he was a baby. He kept giggling and having conversations with people who weren't there. We didn't know what on ziggurats to make of it at first. I always wish that I could have joined in those chats too. They sounded like fun. Tell you what, said Geraldine as I recovered drowsily. Is this a Mrasianart thing? Much more of a hybrid thing, said Auntie C. It seems to be a quirk of evolution that hybrid species can talk to each other, although it only appears to be latent in childhood or moments of great stress. It is in fact how Eleron and Airglow met, the two of them hearing each other's voices when they were both infants. They both shared a great deal of time in each other's heads. Nobody knows quite how much. Something like that makes people very close, very quickly. It makes you feel bonded to somebody for life, so the experts think. But she didn't quite know why. Geraldine felt a pang of sadness at this. She hadn't given much thought as to what might happen if he did save the universe, but she realised that she had sort of hoped she might be able to hang around Eleron for a while longer. Clearly, though, he was just going to end up running back to his wife for the rest of his life, as indeed she knew he should. Still, though, irrationally, she suddenly didn't want to go to these last few planets at all. She wanted to turn the shuttle round and flee, to keep Eleron safe, for them to be together, come what may. She wanted to gather Eleron up, to protect him as he was protecting all of them, to keep him safe from all these awful politicians who had just been using him for their own ends, who couldn't see in him what she could see. As for me, somehow telepathically picking up on this message in my hazy state, I tried my best to forget that I had ever heard it. That was odd, I thought. I'd never heard any being who wasn't a hybrid in my head before. Perhaps humans had a latent power they didn't even know how to use. Geraldine clearly didn't know the real me, if that's what she thought. And besides, I still had a wife. Maybe, if she was still alive. Putting these thoughts to the back of my head, slowly I came to, rather sheepishly. I could tell the Mechion, for one, thought the whole idea of telepathy highly illogical and embarrassing. It was good enough not to say anything directly, and we drove on thoughtfully until we got to our next destination. Camelosia. It had taken a long time to get here, compared to the other planets, and we were running late and were feeling impatient. A fluffy pink planet, it was very pretty from the outside, but rather grey and drab down below. Much like their neighbours on Mechion, on this world everything was laid out neatly in tidy rows and strictly regimented. A plaque commemorating Camelosia's status as
Winners of the universe's tiniest planet competition
flashed up on the screen as we flew past, directed by way of old-fashioned signposts to a shuttle park. On disembarking, we used my portable computer, and it didn't take long to find the planet's headquarters, which turned out to be a giant dome overlooking all the tinier domes laid out around it. Slightly off to the side, in between carved documents that appeared to be set into the hillside that commemorated the founding of Camelosia in the 3rd intergalactic century, was a very ornate and elaborate version of the Endurance and Insurgence statues, along with a highly flowery rendition of their background.
On this day, several score and 4 years ago, the being known as Lizzie did set upon her heavenly guided task to headway with a human from across the universe where ne'er the two had deigned to meet ere long.
I almost didn't recognise the likeness of the 4 figures, so encrusted with bright jewels and gems with these, while all 4 wore strangely Camelosian-style robes. Finally, as we all stood gazing at the statues, a being walked towards us, surrounded by quiet and well-controlled, yet nevertheless very large crowds. However, he then stopped and stared at us, looking at the 10 watches on his arm, one for each planet's local time, I discovered later, and tutting, which was quite a Camelosian character trait. We collectively tried everything to get the attention of these people, but they seemed to be ignoring us, on purpose. Tired of waiting, I walked up to one I recognised as Dr. Huster.
Eleron, he said, I wasn't expecting to see you so soon. Is the First Lady with you?
No, I said sadly. Did you hear? She's been taken prisoner, or worse, along with the rest of the IPO. There's been an alien invasion of the Earth and Decreeta.
No, said Dr. Huster, I haven't heard a thing. I haven't been on the planet long since seeing you. You must have travelled here really fast.
Doctor, we can't seem to get the people here to listen to us, and it is rather urgent, I said, taking him by the arm.
I see. Did you book an appointment?
No, I said. The end of the universe rather got in the way.
What's your problem then? The doctor said. Nobody sees anyone official without an appointment.
Is there any chance you could get them to see me?
Said Dr. Huster. I can but try.
It took him half an hour of conversation, all of which was eating into the time we'd been making up all day. Finally, the doctor came over with a fellow Camelosian, saying,
They've agreed to see you now. I've stressed what a serious case this must be to bring the intergalactic president all the way out here.
Thank you, I said with relief.
Written, said the new figure. My name is called Meetings. Do you request immediate attendance for the political actuary?
Yes, please, I explained, hoping that I'd understood and got the right person. I'm Eleron, IPO president, and it's rather urgent.
That sounds like a suitably prerequisite criteria. I shall endeavour to inquire, accommodate, and accept your request forthwith.
With that, the secretary grandly bowed and left us, only to return a few seconds later.
Our President agrees that your codifying statute is in order and acquiesces to your request by accepting your immediate presence.
Oh, good, I say, and we troop behind him.
Doesn't he talk a lot? Whispered Auntie C. Why, he always seems to be a talking and a conversing and a yammering and a jabbering and a squawking and a nattering and a gossiping and a chit-chattering and a chin-wagging and a belly-aching and a hee-hawing and
Everything is so tidy and orderly here, said Geraldine out loud, trying to make polite conversation. Not like Earth.
As an extraterrestrial being previously unversed in Camelosian structure, it might surprise you to ascertain that we native inhabitants have been extensively diagnosed with a psychiatric condition known as CDO,
Cornelius continued. CDO? Geraldine asked.
Camelosian disorder obsession. It means we like things neat and tidy.
Oh, said Geraldine. I did my master's in how human beings seem to share conditions both mental and physical with other planets. On our planet we call it OCD.
How exponentially human of you, Cornelius continued, to name a disorder about tidiness and would put the letters in a retrograde ordering system. It should always be CDO.
Geraldine was about to say something in reply, but before she could speak we were at the main office, and an older Camelosian was hailing us.
Felicitations. I am Lady Claudine, third in command here on Camelosia. If your demand is urgent, then I will see if it meets the prerequisites needed to pass it on up the chain of command henceforth.
Yes, please, I say. It's of the utmost urgency. The future of the whole universe could be at stake.
I did listen to and comprehend your fascinatingly fortuitous and frequently fearsome broadcast vis-a-vis Medusa's radio waves, Claudine said. Perhaps I should recommend your fervent towards our Vice President for approval, even though that is unremittingly unorthodox.
Please, 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 I said, as quickly as you can. I beg of you.
Pre-Humrasianart and a less emotional response would result in greater objectivity, said Claudine. I do think that given the circumstances, a partial waiving of bureaucratic procedure would not be entirely untoward in this case, assuming that it is written into our constitution as an exception clause and not a rule. Take these documents to the Vice President in triplicate, and he will endeavour to respond sometime in the immediate future.
We were ushered down the corridor to Claudette.
Ahoy, said Miss Camelosian as I handed her the papers. It is fortuitous indeed that you found a minuscule opening in my timetable to accommodate your needs. What seems to be the essence of your overall submission?
Telling her all over again, and getting increasingly agitated by the delay, I added, Please help us, and quickly. You don't understand how pressing time is right now.
The correct procedures must be maintained and fulfilled according to our natural conduct, was all I got in response.
We all sighed.
However, due to the certain calamitous state of the circumstances which brought you here, it would not be unduly irresponsible of me to submit your matter for further consideration towards our President Kennedy.
Yes, 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 I said, let's go.
What momentary culture of your time,
said Claudette, writing furiously on a nearby pad.
This will explain everything.
But your predecessor already filled everything in already, I cried.
The possible end of our futures is no excuse for not maintaining the correct bureaucratic procedures in the present,
was all the Vice President said. Thankfully, after a quarter hour of scribbling, which drove me quietly spare, I had a piece of paper in my hand and was knocking at another door, further down the corridor.
Greetings, brethren, President Cody said. Do pray make the most of the seating apparel provided. I presume that your perambulatory circumlocation here is to your satisfaction.
Most satisfactory, I remark, and the others all nod, while I hand over 2 pads of paper and try to converse like a Camelosian in the hope that it would speed up the process. Now, Mr. President, I do hope that JJJJJ explained everything to you satisfactorily, and you know why we're here. Sadly, time is of the essence. We are also tired and need a place to recuperate. Cody nodded.
I have been familiarised with A, the gravity of the situation, B, the task in hand, and C, the desired outcome. Please note that Camelosia has, as a matter of some expediency, played our role in your manner of campaign, and that I have hitherto agreed to provide the party of the first party, formerly known as Eleron, with their allotted request.
Good, I concluded. You mean your section of the statue is already prepared?
Affirmative, Cody continued. It is already in transit, waiting for final inspection and deliverance upon the arrival of your good selves.
Thank you, I said. And rooms? It's getting late, and I don't think we will all make it to another planet without rest.
Lodgings are to be located in the nearest habitable receptacle. Cornelius will direct you there ere long.
Brilliant, I said, and heard my companions all breathe a sigh of relief. Thank you so much for your part in our operation. I hope that we will be able to do you justice. Codus replied,
Never have it be said that Cavallosia was found wanting or prevaricating when the universe was under immediacy of annihilation. Also we do for us, our heirs and successors, declare by these present that all and every, the parsons being our subjects, which shall dwell and inhabit within every or any of the said several colonies and plantations, and every of their children which shall happen to be born within the limits and precincts of the said several colonies and plantations, shall have and enjoy all limited franchises and immunities within any of our dominions, to all intents and purposes, as if they had been abiding and born within this realm of Decreeta, or any of our said dominions, in respect as regards our fear of disestablishment totalitarianism.
I struggled to understand Camalosians at the best of times, and currently my head was tying itself in knots, the weight of responsibility damaging my customary patience. All right, I said, my head hurting. Time is of the essence. We are very grateful, and get the picture. The question is, were we Agrosians? Cody looked a little hurt at my outburst, and I regretted it. Some diplomat I turned out to be. Another reason the IPO might have been right about my unsuitability, I secretly thought.
We the parties of the first part collectively have to, however, there will be an agreeable end to such upsetting difficulties and dilemmas vis-a-vis this alien incursion. Now pray let Cornelius demonstrate the directions of your accommodation.
Cornelius came back and bowed.
If all you other worldly beings could pertain to follow me, I will endeavour to fulfil my obligations and permit your intended utterances with immediate effect.
I gave my speech to a very solemn and sombre group of Camalosians, this time explaining how our foes were wicked because they seemed to have no interest in our treaties, and how we might yet force them into some sort of restitution if they had taken the Earth or other planets. It seemed to go down quite well, though I must confess I struggled to understand some of the questions put to me, many of which went on for several minutes. At the end, the Camalosians rattled some form of scrolls at me, the substitute for applause on this world. Next we all trooped behind Cornelius again, and were led outside past a 10-foot-high Camalosian statue, a reptilian chest that looked extremely lifelike. Impressive, said Geraldine. Even though I've seen so many alien body parts now, the size and scope always amazes me. Do you think your plan will work, Eleron? I really hope so, Geraldine, I said, feeling a bit too tired to care. Everyone has done their part. Now we must do ours.
Now if you could make your way to the induction entrances, positioned 5 degrees southeast from here, I would be satisfactorily obliged, Cornelius concluded. Incidentally, please accept the following trinket from Camalosia, no party of the first party's contribution to the hitherto request vis-a-vis the planetary souvenir. He handed me a curious quarter of objects that looked like earthly bulldog clips.
Very nice, I said, but are they really the sort of gentle weaponry we need to... Ow, I said as one bit me on the hand, causing me to drop 2 more that then bit into my feet. And the 4th on my tail. Get it off me! I flapped toward Geraldine, pulled them away, giggling. I curled up into a ball from the pain, coming to only when I realised that we were in the presence of a great deal of excited Camalosians, all murmuring together. Some of them were taking holographic pictures of the Universal. Oh, great, another sign the IPO were right about my unsuitability for this role. I said, trying my best to recover and look presidential. Highly impressive. I'm just what we needed. Thank you. If it is not to remit myself to mention your congratulations are expressively premature until your objectives have been satisfactorily concluded, said Cody grandly. Other species we... Then he stopped squeaking, suddenly, in horror. What is it? Squeaked Jennifer. My dearest acquaintances, I must humbly apologise. Please disregard my previous erroneous statement. Your lodgings are in fact only 4.17 degrees southeast. What a regretfully preposterous and incomplete your host has proven to be. Oh, that's quite all right, I joked. You were close enough for me. Who made you chairman of a pedantic society? Co-chairman of a pedantic society, Cornelius said. There are 8 of us, and none of us have any higher claim of authoritarianisation than anyone else. It's an important role. Oh, I said, chastened. You had to go and ask, whispered Geraldine in my ear, grinning, as we walked on. Our Camalosian rooms were very different to the luxurious ones from Ducius. It felt as if a giant bed had been simply plonked down in the middle of an Earth tax office, and we were surrounded by filing cabinets and writing utensils, with framed contracts dating back several centuries on the walls. By the time I was ushered into mine, I could already hear that Auntie C had fallen asleep, her deep cavernous snores reverberating around the walls, and hoped that I would soon follow. Somehow, though, I was too tired to sleep again, and laughed at the thought of explaining that illogical conclusion to either a Camalosian or a Mechion. Tired but wired, that was me right now. Exhausted but exhilarated at this exile, exonerated only by the expediousness of this expedition. Oh no, I had spent too long on Camalosia already. The world that of all the 10 was perhaps the most opposite to Mraz and our straight-talking, deep-thinking selves, and yet in other ways was only a nudge away from the trap of pretentiousness we sometimes fell into. I hadn't been here very long, and already I was beginning to think like a native. To distract myself, I stared out the window at the familiar yet different configuration of stars in the sky, marvelling again at the light-dotted darkness all around me. To think all those stars that I was seeing were really sending out their light from thousands of years ago. Would there even be any civilizations left on our side of the universe to see the light they were giving off right now in a few hundred years, I wondered. Even here, in an activity that usually relaxed me, I got a sense of time passing too fast, of slipping away. It felt as if I was all alone with time pressing in on me, as if a countdown had been launched where only I could sense the timer. I wondered if the aliens had discovered the Futsard yet, and whether time had caught up with itself, so that they were looking on to what I saw, even now, or in the near future. Would the aliens that I had met so far be vulnerable purely because they had helped me? Would I have more deaths on my conscience soon? Was this the calm before the storm? I had to get on, to make people see how dangerous it all was, and I half wondered about ringing up the ambassador and starting our conversation off all over again to make sure he knew how important it was that he was ready the next morning. But what would be the point of that? There was nothing I could say now that wouldn't make as much impact tomorrow. Still, though, I found it hard to sleep, as if I was carrying on a secret that would implode if I dared to drift off, that I alone had been put in charge of protecting. It would be so easy to run away, to not have to face this, or admit to anyone what was eating me up, that I wasn't meant to be the president at all. It would only be one for the next 3 days, at most. Suddenly, without warning, I found myself thinking about Eleanor and Oberon for the first time in a long time, and realised how alone I felt without them there, even with these other brave souls the other side of these walls from me. How would they have coped in my position, I wondered. They had only had responsibility for a planet, but for me it was our entire universe. I knew that they had only got through their ordeal thanks to the help of the people around them. I thought with gratitude about the friendly people we'd met along the way, all of the strangers who had risked their lives to be with me on this journey, when they could have just stayed at home and looked the other way. How lucky I'd been to discover so many valuable companions who had all been there for me in my hour of need. I thought too about all the ancient civilizations that I had visited so far, and others that were yet to come, but were equally old. Would all of them be dead soon, on my watch? I couldn't get this wrong, or run away, or not only those planets and their past would be at risk, but my own past, the people who had gone through so much intergalactic angst just to get me to this point. That didn't make me feel any better though, given what I knew, that none of my companions did. Not fully, for by rights it shouldn't be me here trying to save them, as I was president in name only, for a limited period of time. I groaned and stuffed the peculiar cylindrical feather-stuffed pieces of cloth I had been provided over my head, wondering if that's why they had been placed in my room, and hoping they weren't some form of Camalosian recipe. What would become of us all? I had always known things weren't going to be easy. I was still staggered to find that things were quite this hard. If only I had someone to share his thoughts with, for I couldn't possibly burden any of my companions any more than I had. They had already given me so very much. Just then there was a quiet, gentle knock at my door. "Eleron, I can come back another time if you're sleeping." It was Geraldine's voice. With relief I went to open the door. "I'm sorry," she said. "I couldn't sleep, and guessed as a half-human you probably couldn't too. And if I'm honest, I felt lonely." "You're quite right. You're just the person I wanted to see," I said, pulling her into the provided square-shaped chair. To be honest, I was sitting here feeling lonely too. "Are you missing home?" Geraldine said, sitting down on one of the strange chairs we'd been provided with. "Your wife." "Your wife?" It came out a bit more awkwardly than she had meant it to, when she had tried this conversation out earlier in her head. Yes, yes, I concluded. Look, there's something I need to tell you, but I'm not sure if I can. Things went so wrong at the end in so many ways, and I would hate anyone to think I was leading them under false pretences. I honestly don't know if Airglow ever wants to see me again, but I still miss her all the same. I would give anything to save her. Is that ridiculous? Geraldine smiled. Not as ridiculous as being chased across the universe by small balls of red fluff. I'm sure it wasn't that bad, Eleron. Even presidents are entitled to have arguments, and running the universe is a big strain. You know, I'm sure she's probably sitting there right now, missing you hugely. You have a point, I grinned. About the ridiculousness of what we're doing, anyway. I can't believe the fate of the universe rests on us, beings who have never even met before today. I guess it really tests my idea that the universe is just a bunch of friends we haven't met yet. How about you? I can't believe I've never asked. Are you missing any significant other? Geraldine mulled this over. Other, yes. Significant, no, she replied. He probably hasn't even noticed I've gone yet. He's rather too wrapped up in his own little world to care about such a big thing as saving the universe. She looked awkwardly up at me, and I pretended not to see it, instead logging it away as one of my things to mull over later. Silence fell, and both of us tried to work out what to say next, Geraldine getting there before me, with a tactful change of the subject. I keep thinking about all the people who'll die if we get this wrong, said Geraldine. It's quite some pressure. I guessed you'd be feeling the same thing too, but even more so, I suppose, and thought I ought to be there in case you needed to talk to someone. I sigh a great big long sigh. Oh, you have no idea. I keep thinking I didn't get this job to do any of this. I wanted my career to be all about peace, not war. Geraldine sighed too. I never got as far up the career ladder as you, Eleron. The one thing I learned early on was that in politics you don't get to choose what careers or legacy you get. Rather, they're chosen for you by whatever twist of fate life has planned. Part of the job is just rolling with the punches, I'm afraid. I smile, for what feels like the first time in a long time. If we ever get through this, Geraldine, I will make sure there is a job going on Decreeta if you want it. You're a far better politician than any of the ones I work with. Sometimes I wonder how they made it so far up the career ladder themselves. Bribery some of them, I suspect. Or if we really are getting the best of every planet after all, the way they say we are. Or if we really are getting the best of every planet after all, the way they say we are. Or whether we're just being parcelled off with all the worst candidates. Geraldine coughed. The Earth isn't in the IPO, so I guess I can't. But thank you for the offer. I would have liked to have taken it. I guess this changes everything now, though, I continued. If by some fluke we do save the universe from destruction, everyone will want to be in the IPO, including Earth. There you go, said Geraldine. Maybe something good will come out of the darkness. A little pinprick of light. That was another of your speeches I remember well, Eleron. I'm amazed. You really were listening, weren't you? Of course, Geraldine said. Every word. I don't believe it, I said. I thought I was a failure. I thought no one was paying me any attention at all. I told Geraldine as briefly as a stressed Humrasianart who needed to get this stuff off his chest good, everything that had happened during my brief time in Decreeta, but I couldn't yet bring myself to tell my companion how it ended, and how I wasn't going to be president for long, because of that trait only humans seem to share. Shame. Finally I finished and sat back, feeling self-pitying, another unfortunate human trait, so the others would probably call it. Ah, said Geraldine, now I understand everything, and I can see why you didn't want to tell me. Maybe best not to tell the others yet too, but it doesn't change anything for me. Let me tell you, Eleron, they were all wrong. All of them. You are the perfect leader for the universe, all the more so because you worry you're not. In fact, you're not like any politician I ever met from any species. They would all be trying to bluster through right now and trying to pretend that they were perfect and blaming everyone else. Are you sure? I asked. But what they said was true. I really wasn't doing anything much of any importance at all. I should have realised that and not left it to the others. Oh, give yourself a break, Geraldine said. You were there, what, a week? Most politicians haven't got to anything deeper than playing with the pencil sharpeners on their desks by then. And you discovered the cases of fraud and the source of links to the press and had it out with the right people, not to mention writing to people who needed comfort from you and sorting out a long-running economic dispute and establishing 10 health statutes and goodness knows what else. You were doing the job you were hired to do, which was to represent us real beings who don't normally get a say. They were all part of the old crowd, frightened that their jobs were going to be taken off them. That's why they didn't want to be run by you. The more they attacked you, the more you can bet you were doing what was right. Really? I asked plaintively. You bet, Geraldine said. I can see it all. They wanted to show you in your worst light so the universe would never again elect a socialist hybrid. You were too brilliant for your own good, though, Eleron. You uncovered things they thought you'd never find out. You stood up to them when they thought you would just take the quiet way out, the way your vice president clearly did. You united everyone in speech after speech. You changed your colleagues' roles to get the best out of them as a unit. They may have elected you as a joke at first, for they must have felt as if they created a monster in you that was going to eat them all after a while. So of course they were going to lie and defang the monster, telling him that he didn't have the power to frighten them in order to keep their jobs and their ill-gotten gains. It wasn't just them though, I said sadly. The periodicals and holograph e-papers had it in for me too. Of course, Geraldine said. They represent the old guard and they were afraid of you too. You were the big bad Humrasianart coming to huff and puff and blow the hypocrisy down, perhaps going back centuries, and they just couldn't handle it. After all, what is a corruptible press and a corruptible group of politicians most afraid of in the whole wide universe? Not aliens intent on blowing them up, but someone completely uncorruptible who would make them look shameful by contrast. They were scared of you because you were the single best person for the job. They weren't putting up with you because they thought you were the worst, as you seem to think. I hug her. Thank you, I said. I suddenly feel much better about everything. Well, there's still the small mass of the universe being blown up, and it'd all be my responsibility, of course. But apart from that... Let me tell you a story, Eleron, Geraldine continued. A long story, fittingly, as we're on Camalosia right now. And maybe you'll see why you were oh so wrong, and why not just me, but everybody I admire and trust voted for you. My great-great-great-great-grandparents and all the others like them in the pre-mid-21st century were all brought up in the awful era of climate change, COVID and Brexit, and all sorts of nasty things splitting the world apart. Every year seemed to fling a new crisis or tyrant into power, to the point where people lived in a constant state of fear, not to mention confusion because the wrong people were controlling what they were told. Ordinary people like my relatives had no one to vote for anymore that represented them, and decisions were made on their behalf that affected the whole planet by a tiny percentage of people that nobody really wanted. They told me that what got them through this period was the tiny hope that it didn't matter if we messed up too badly, because someday, somehow, somebody out there superior to us would come and save us. Even if they never said that to anyone, that's what they all secretly thought. Maybe it was an individual hero, someone who spoke out and broke rules and who wouldn't be silenced or bribed, despite everything that was thrown at them. Or maybe they would be a race of superior, wise, noble beings who would save us from our own stupidity, from wars, famine, greed, ecological disaster, and ultimately from ourselves. They gave up trying to make things better for themselves in the 21st century, which was a shame. Just think where we might have been now had they been brave enough to kick out the people who tried to keep them ignorant and placid, or making their lives worse. The corrupt leaders, the multimillionaires who made money out of poisoning their planet, the people who wanted to make people separate and afraid, and the media who kept everyone ignorant of what was really going on. How much better life might have been if the majority had been able to see the way through all this back then, before it got worse. Why? I asked, leaning forward in my chair. Why didn't they riot? It worked on Mars. My ancestors thought they wouldn't have to, secretly. They spent their lives hoping that day would come soon, because without an intervention they had no hope of survival. When the events of Endurance happened, and we learned that there were other planets out there with intelligent life on them, mankind got ever more reckless. The Earth started taking bigger and bigger risks that were more and more stupid, in the belief that there wasn't just one alien to save them now, but 9. It did help for a while too. The creations of the clandesprods allowed us to live longer, and their solar fuel helped our planet ecologically. While the technology of the Mechions allowed us to live in less hardship. The Dewsbury Giants passed on some really great recipes. The Camalosians helped us out with our tax returns. But whereas other planets gained from having such helpful neighbours, over time the Earth retrograded, because although we knew we weren't alone anymore, We also knew finally that no one race out there had all the answers, or was coming to save us. Indeed, every species seems to have problems of its own, and couldn't even save itself. Even things the Earth conquered a long time ago, in some cases. We celebrate our individuals far more than the clandesprods. We're not quite as endlessly driven by technology as the Mechions. We're not as scared as the Glabdahardits. We're more driven than the Habridats. We're friendlier than the Grumps. Less pedantic than the Camalosians. Not quite as greedy as the Dewsbury Giants. We're far less self-centred than the Belobrats, mostly. If you don't mind me saying so, we're a little more practical than the Mrasianarts too, on the whole. It feels as if the universe has given each of our planets a fatal flaw, and only by being more like the other species out there can we save ourselves, because we know now that no one else is going to, or has the right to. We are all human, if you like, struggling with our own demons. It's just that 9 of us go by a different name, that's all. In the end, there was no one coming to save the humans. The only way we could be saved was by saving ourselves. We just needed someone to help us see that. This is why your speech has made such a difference to me, and the people who think like me, Eleron. Because in your vision for the universe, we worked together, and we saved each other. We all helped one another, and gave us all the strengths and abilities the others didn't have, so that the weakest of us never got left behind, and the strongest of us never got wrongful power over the weak. If our discovery of new species is to stand for anything, then surely it has to be that. To help each other when they try to take us over. To help them when they need help. We shouldn't be running away or turning our back on the universe that reaches out a hand to us, or trying to defeat or bribe or bully anyone else, because it only ends up hurting us in the long run, and cutting us out from the people we need to live with in order to be truly free. We just need a leader to show us that the universe is greater than any of our petty problems. And whatever flaws you may or may not have, you are that leader, Eleron. I guarantee that. Yes, that's it. That's what made me go into politics, I sniffed, honoured to have my life's calling recognised at last, unexpectedly, just when I had given up hope. It's not a bad old universe, and it could work so well if everyone just changed the way they thought about themselves and each other. Even inside the IPO we could work together so well, for the good of everybody, with just a bit less suspicion and bribery and a bit more friendship. Everyone had the wrong jobs, but I saw how good they could be in the right roles, if only they trusted in me. Your heart was in the right place, Eleron, never doubted, and your vision is still the right one, I'm sure of it. It's not your fault you came up against a scheming Habridat and a corrupt Belobrat and a First Lady who was susceptible enough to everyone's charms to sell you out, and a press that tried to ridicule you, and a universe trying to look the other way. Nobody voted for the old way after all. And yet people genuinely voted for your new way because they wanted a change. And they really liked you, Eleron. Have you ever thought of moving to Mars? I joked, suddenly feeling uplifted. You would make a fine Mrasianart. You're halfway there already. And that's from a hybrid who knows his ratios. I have, Geraldine said seriously. It sounds nicer than Earth. In fact, I spent a lot of my childhood dreaming about living there. And do you know who first inspired me to travel to the stars, going to a better planet? No, I said. Who? Your mum, she said simply. Insurgence was one of my favourite books growing up. Even in the inferior Earth version it was only in 2D and didn't have pictograms and holograms. All that weird audiobook version with that bloke and that weird accent in the Earth edition. Dear me, what kind of mongrel hybrid accent was that anyway? Anyway, your mother was ever so brave to travel all that way back in the days when it took so long to shuttle anywhere. She reminds me of you. You have her bravery, and your dad's idealism too come to that. Courage and hope. They're exactly the two things we need right now if we're to save this universe, and you represent both those things far more than you think you do. Oh, and intelligence. We need that too, and you have it, Eleron, but that's all your own doing. Thank you, I said awkwardly. So much. I really don't know what to say. That was everything I needed to hear right now. Who would have thought that a human of all species would prove to be the stabilising, mature influence I so needed to hear? Good, Geraldine said, smiling up at me. It's only our leaders giving us a bad name, you know. I don't think most humans are all that bad. We just haven't all learned to think for ourselves yet, that's all. We're asked to accept so much on trust from distrustful people, and so easily influenced by what we're told we're meant to think, that we don't stop to think how things really are. Some of us are almost sensible. And it's only fair. You've been telling me things from afar I needed to hear for years now. It's about time I return the favour. Go to sleep now, Eleron, or at least try. The universe really needs you, even the parts that pretend they don't. Thank you, I said again, holding a hand. You have no idea what all that means to me. Geraldine smiled. Good night now, Eleron. Oh, and one last piece of advice. Don't keep this all to yourself. Your vision for the universe was people working together, so don't carry so much on your own shoulders. We are all your friends here with you now. We all want to help, and the only way any of us are going to survive is through teamwork and cooperation. She crept out of my room quietly as I was nodding off already, and somehow, for the first time since moving to Decreeta, I managed to sleep really well. Eglo spent a restless night tied up between the broken Doris and the cool, calm and collected Horace. She had tried arguing with her captors that she deserved better treatment, echoed Bob's promises of rewards to any other hive that helped her, and complained bitterly and loudly that these aliens couldn't just do what they liked to the intergalactic president's wife. The hive, though, just ignored her, as did the IPO, more aware as they were just how much power these aliens had. After all, she confessed to herself secretly when the Belobrat side ran out of steam. They were right. With Eleron she was somebody, but without him she was a nobody. She missed him like crazy, she realised. She hadn't been apart from him for so long, and the hole where he should be was so very empty. What would Eleron do in this situation, she thought to herself. He was clearly out there, coming up with some noble plan. He was reliable like that, she realised now, however much he panicked existentially by the hour. They were two of the things she loved most about him, his ability to get things done, and the humility with which she always worried if he would ever get the slightest thing done at all. However, she'd also learned from her husband that a good plan relied on the actions of several people, and she was very angry at the rest of the IPO for simply going along with the wishes of these invaders. Unlike her passive husband, Egla was by nature assertive, and if there was a rescue attempt of any sort to make, then she was determined to play her part. Slowly, a plan began to come to her. For ease of meal times, the IPO's main hall where they were being held captive had been placed nearby to the doors to the kitchen, where the food replicator machines were. So far, the IPO had been getting the most random assortment of food, as the aliens pressed buttons without knowing what they were doing, and doling out dishes to whoever, irrespective of what planet they were from, with each of the aliens having their hands untied in turn to eat one by one. Eglo herself had discovered a true loathing of Earth food this night, where she had been served hot dog buns smothered in baked beans and icing for breakfast, lunch and tea. Having learned from Eleron's mum about the weird culinary concoctions on Earth, she shuddered at the thought that this was in all likelihood a real Earth delicacy, but for all she knew they probably contained real dogs too. Due to a larger size, however, the aliens had struggled to tie Eglo as well as the others, and she had already managed to waggle a few wingtip sleeves. It would only be a matter of time before she had everything free and could make a dash for the nearest place, which happened to be the kitchens. But it was still quite a way, and she was still terrified of those alien weapons. What she really needed was a distraction, but which of her IPO colleagues would put themselves at risk for her plan, she wondered. They were a weak bunch after all, she supposed, not at all like a brave Eleron. Oh well, there was nothing to do but ask them, quietly, in bursts during the moments they talked amongst themselves. In the morning, perhaps. Eglo suddenly felt very tired and began to nod off, the hot dogs doing somersaults into a pool of acid in her stomach.
Universal entry, pause, AB 544-936-49384. Browse Universal Systems, keep going, acting, President Eleron. Headline, mission to the Grumpus, retrieved from Universal Records Office.
Solitary felicitations, waved the Camelosians as we left the next morning. They were expressions manifold themselves, as perspicuous in perpetuity. The shuttle was off and flying to its next destination, Mrsianbrat, with the addition of Cornelius on board, and a present of what seemed to be spare antlers for our next species. Wanting to make up lost time, I urged Jennifer to fly as fast as she dared, and it seemed no time at all that the next planet was coming up on our shuttle screen. This world was a pretty orange planet, surrounded by a ring of splintered rocks. A result, so I knew from my years of reading the Universal, of an interplanetary dispute between two halves of the planet over resources. Having met only a few Mrgrumps in my time, all of them short-tempered and stubborn, I could suddenly understand why. Their planet, though, was gorgeous up close, full of the most exquisitely carved buildings hewn out of a landscape, part rock, part metal, part crystal, and painted in brilliant colours. Their endurance and insurgent statues were made up of similar patchwork combinations, and I was surprised to see the familiar figures I knew so well rendered with a scowl, huge eyebrows, and antlers. It was overall, though, the most beautiful and palatial of places, making Mars seem almost a slum that had just been condemned, and Decreeta like a slum that had been condemned centuries ago, making me wonder why the natives had grown up so short-tempered when surrounded by such beauty. This would be one of my hardest challenges yet, I thought, something that didn't change when, on landing, we were greeted by a very stern and taciturn being with the most enormous antlers I had ever seen. However, Mrgrumpus turned out to be the easiest planet of the lot, and we were on our way in no time thanks to their famous efficiency. When we told our host who we were, she pointed to the IPO logo in the town square and said,
You!
before introducing herself as Mrasianbrat. I inquired whether the statue was completed yet.
Do!
She yelled, and a bunch of Mrgrump workers ran off to a nearby area where large chipping sounds could be heard. Then a smash.
Blue!
Grunted Mrasianbrat. Eventually the sculpture, that was exactly like two Mrgrump flippers, was wheeled out to us.
Blue!
Added Mrasianbrat proudly, and indeed they were, like most Mrgrumps on this planet, the others being orange, green or purple. Occasionally we saw those made up of multiple colours and stripes or polka dots. We thanked Mrasianbrat and handed over the Camelosian antlers. Next she bade us wait and clicked her fingers where a group of obedient Mrgrumps rushed over to her with a parcel.
Do!
She declared proudly. For our next planet? I asked.
Blue!
She said. Another larger box contained a bigger object that Quincy quickly took over to our shuttle with his anti-gravity device.
For you!
Mrasianbrat nodded. A planetary weapon souvenir? I asked.
Blue!
She nodded, with far too much gusto for my liking. She then asked me to deliver my speech to a lot of gruff-looking Mrgrumps, all sitting in front of me with their arms folded. This was the only speech where I was given a time limit, so I ripped through it with gusto, gladly leaving parts out, for I was getting heartily sick of my speech by now. At the end, my audience all waved their antlers at us. Apparently, a good sign. I guess it's time to say goodbye, I said to Mrasianbrat.
I wouldn't do.
She replied in farewell. Thanking her again, we went to walk off to the shuttle, only to realise we were being followed.
Me too,
said Mrasianbrat, pointing to our shuttle. It looked as if our team had just increased by one, alongside a gift of a pair of giant spare flippers. We had been through a lot by now, and while the shuttle was wonderful indeed, even Mechion technology hadn't been able to eradicate G-forces entirely. Thanks to our disturbed night, both Geraldine and I were getting sleepy. Thankfully, due to Hardis's orbit, it was still midday for Jennifer, who had turned out to be a quite brilliant pilot, fearless as she navigated her way through the cosmos's obstacles, if that wasn't an odd thing to say about a Hardis. I found myself nodding off, sandwiched as I was between Auntie C and Geraldine, and just to the right of Quincy, who had taken a rug out of his dimensionally transcendental pocket and somehow extended it so that it wrapped around everyone. Auntie C had apparently been talking to me at length for some time, but I hadn't been listening, lost as I was staring out of the window at the infinite cosmos, and sleepily trying out my telepathy again to see if Ergo could hear me all the way out here. I got the sensation of some truly awful food, but before I could concentrate on it fully, Geraldine dug me in the ribs, a bit harder than necessary, I thought, and I came to suddenly. Sorry, what? Poor Eleron, smiled the clandestine. All that adventuring and guilt and stress has worn you out. You have borne so much of it alone. But no longer. We are here now. We live and die not as a species or as one individual, but as a unit. Why, I remember my old teacher telling me there is no iron clandestine and getting detention for pointing out that there was one in Ziggurat free and one in the universe come to that. It does strike me as odd, but the way the rest of the universe, including most of my own world, insists on acting as if we were all small, rather than part of something infinitely greater. Thank you, I said. I feel much better being part of a team. The Peace Clan. I know we're not as much use as the IPO, but at least we're here and ready to back you up in any way we can, Eleron, Geraldine joked. At this I surprised myself by crying bitterly, outwardly, remembering the last time I had felt I was leading a strong team. Those last conversations I had last had with the ones I loved and trusted, dancing infinity circles around my head, leaving me feeling like a fraud that was deceiving these good, kind and trusting people. Would they come to harm because of me and my mistakes? I realised I must have seemed a million light years away from the presidential image I wanted to be presenting, especially to the two relative strangers in the shuttle. But my emotions had been building to such a degree over the past few days that I couldn't contain them any longer. Thankfully, the Glabdahada didn't seem to notice, and the Mechion didn't seem to care. But I felt embarrassed all the same. Horace's words about my being too emotional for my job, ringing in my ear. Auntie C hugged me, while Geraldine looked crestfallen. "I'm sorry, Eleron," she said. "Did I say something wrong?" "No," I lied, trying not to catch Geraldine's eye. "I was just thinking about Airglow and the others, and how maybe we weren't as happy as you all think we were. I'm sorry, this sort of thing is hard to talk about. It's actually easier for me to talk about the end of the universe. That's less personal somehow." Geraldine snorted. "Oh, I don't think that's anything to do with species. Love isn't easy anywhere, believe you me. In my experience, it's meant to be messy, complicated, overwhelming. Or at least that's the pure human way of doing things. If it wasn't such a big thing, settling down and having a family, it wouldn't matter quite so much about getting it right. That's the human condition." Auntie C laughed, trying to lighten the mood after what she knew was a touchy subject. "The same for Glamorous. It must be a universal condition. Oh, we'd like to think we've got all our possible problems ironed out and have sorted out our futures by making sure that only similar, compatible Glamorous spend any amount of time together. But that's all nonsense. Every generation thinks the one following won't have to go through the problems they've been through, and they've got it right this time. But invariably they fall into the same traps over and over again, over and over and over, over and over and over, over and over and over and over and over and over." Quincy nodded.
Even our best technology and dating apps can't solve this perennial problem of compatibility.
"Romance is regretfully far from a human knowledge even to the greatest of Cabalosians. There's a pathway study with multiple intrinsic obstacles," added Cornelius. Jennifer squeaked her agreement from the front seat too. Suddenly I felt less alone. "Thank you, everyone," I said. "I can't tell you how alone I felt since watching it all go so very wrong, so very fast." "Not that fast," added Auntie C. "I well remember how happy you were for years when you were first together." "My fault too," I added. "I thought things were going so well, but I think I relaxed and didn't work as hard as I should have done." "Nonsense," said Auntie C. "It takes two to tangle, as I believe they say on Earth." "Almost," said Geraldine, debating whether to explain the tango to a being with multiple limbs and a very large body, and deciding better of it.
"At least you'll be able to get back to the IPO,"
said Quincy thoughtfully.
"I know from all the media reports what a great team you make and how well you get on with each other."
I burst into tears again.
"Something else wrong?"
He asked, worried. "That last conversation didn't go too well either," I said, not quite ready to reveal the full extent of what happened quite yet. "It turns out that I didn't win the election after all. It was all a sham, a ruse by the Belobrats to have someone in charge who was easy to control. They've lost faith in me, if they ever actually had it. I'm not who you think I am. I've let you all down. I'm so sorry." The Mechion wordlessly passed me a handkerchief from one of his considerable pockets that shimmered in the dark and instantly mopped up all my tears, while Auntie C gave me a large Clandesprod hug and knocked all the stuffing out of me. Geraldine hugged me too, on the other side. "Well, that's all right. If your Decreeta War Cabinet wanted to take it in turns to be in charge to get a bigger perspective. Anyway, Eleron, they were wrong. Being a true leader is knowing that you don't have all the answers yourself and delegating when you have to, while still leading from the front and doing the hard work and doing your best to inspire others to follow you. The other species might not recognise those traits, but as a human, I can't tell you how important they are, and how much they're lacking in our own Earth politicians, each of them scared of their own shadow, and out to blame each other for things." "Here," cried Auntie C. "Clandesprons know all about working with a team, and you're the best at that, of helping people to get the best out of themselves and make them feel better about their lot in life. That's why you won that election victory, and only as you did, against far more experienced politicians. Their vision of the universe wasn't as strong as yours, though. If there's one thing I've learned from my adopted home of Mars, then it's to never confuse being impractical with being hopeless. If there's two things I've learned from being a clandestine one, it's that the people around you can be wrong, even when you think they know you really well, and they have your best intentions at heart, and it's hard to stand up against that sort of peer pressure, which you did, Eleron. And if there's one thing I know from your human side, and that of your mother, then it's that you should never confuse emotion for helplessness or cowardice. Quincy coughed.
To add in my thoughts to this conversation, I voted for you even against the Mechion candidate, because while I thought it like excuse for the best of Mechion 5, it was your speech that inspired me to think about the universe fairly, from the viewpoint of everyone, as it were.
Jennifer squeaked from the front.
Your speeches made me feel less scared and alone in the universe, Eleron, which is quite something for a Dr. Harding.
You are considerably the greater candidate by a forceful and significant magnitude and received by individual vote additionally,
nodded Cornelius. It goes without saying that I voted for you too, said Auntie C. No one else was as worthy as you, Eleron. What? I said. You all voted for me. My vice president rather gave me the impression that no one had really voted for me, but he'd rigged the voting so I would take all the blame when things went wrong, and he could stand in for me. Of course, said Geraldine. The others may have been better politicians, but you were the best person, and so the best candidate by far. I peered in the darkness to see 4 nodding heads staring back at me. I suddenly felt a weight like zero gravity lifting from my shoulders. I really wasn't as alone as I thought I was, after carrying all those thoughts around with me for so long. Only for another weight of zillion gravity to fall back on them again, as the shuttle lurched from side to side and almost tipped upside down, leaving our pilot to squeak worriedly. We all looked out of the window to see a very alien-looking ship none of us recognised, hovering in space.
Is that them? Have they found us? Already?
Asked Quincy, who was nearest the side of the window with the shuttle in it. But we were all too afraid to admit the truth to ourselves just then. They can't see us, can they? Panicked Geraldine, as Jennifer left the controls and ran underneath her seat. I don't know, I said. I guess we'll never know now if our plan would have worked either. Well, I thank you all for coming this far with me, and I'm so sorry it didn't work out. The door of the shuttle, compromised by the attack, began to splinter open, sucking us through to the darkness outside. I caught the sight of Jennifer's tail disappearing out the door in a flurry of squeaking as everyone else desperately tried to catch her and ended up falling out of the shuttle too. Thank you, friends, I said. I guess this is goodbye.
Decretion times.
The Decretan Daily.
Intergalactic Decreeta server. Decreeta unavailable. Decreeta daily newspaper has been cancelled for today.
Thank you, do come again.